Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you so much. And it's absolutely my pleasure and honor to have you all here with us today evening. I know it is quite a fight to come from directly from your offices, wherever you are, from the traffic that's there in Bangalore. And I understand it's raining also outside. So truly, we are so thankful to welcome you all today for the launch and release of Media Ownership Monitor, a study of who owns media in India. This is sponsored by the German government. The Media Ownership Monitor is a part of the global project of Reporter ohne Grenzen, the German section of the international human rights organization Reporters Without Borders, that aims to defend freedom of the press and the right to inform and to be informed. Countries apart from India where media ownership studies have been published so far are Albania, Brazil, Colombia, Cambodia, Ghana, Mexico, Mongolia, Morocco, Tunisia, Turkey, Ukraine, Peru, and the Philippines. In fact, in addition to India this year, while we are launching media ownership model, it has searched markets in Sri Lanka, Egypt, Lebanon, and Tanzania. Data Leads is actually truly honored to have collaborated with the RSF to build a publicly available, continuously updated database that lists owners of all leading mass media across outlets in India. We hope this will strengthen media transparency, shed light on the risks to media pluralism caused by media ownership, and concentration and eventually help the cause of free media and democracy. We had a great launch in Delhi on the 29th of May, and we received huge response, and we really hope that Bangalore will rock too. So thank you so much. So before I move on, I want to sincerely thank from the RSF team and for the team of Data Leads, our advisory committee members for all the resource and all our resource people for their continuous support and guidance that they've shown on us in the last 6 months of the research, and we truly hope that they will continue to guide us in our future endeavors. To begin with, thanking you so much, Sir Dr. S.Y. Qureshi. He's the former election commissioner. Mr. Prashant Bhushan, Supreme Court advocate. Mr. Wajahat Habibullah is the former Chief Information Commissioner. Ms. Sevanti Nainan is a veteran journalist and founder of The Hoot. Mr. Pankaj Pachori is the founder and editor of Go News India. Mr. Vinay Kumar is a senior journalist. Dr. Anubhuti Yadav, Department Head of Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Ms. Monica Gulati, she's the Program Executive with All India Radio. Ms. Shilpi Jha, she's the Assistant Professor with GD Goenka University. Ms. Nisha Bambani is the Supreme Court Advocate, and she's also the legal advisor to the media ownership model in India. Dr. Pallavi Majumdar, she's a professor with Amity University. Dr. Rafiq Masoodi, former Deputy Director General of Doordarshan. Dr. Vibodh Parthasarthi, academician and author. Mr. Shastri Ramachandra is a journalist and author. So thank you so much. So before we go further, a couple of things that I just want to tell you for tonight, that this entire event is going live on Facebook. We're live streaming it, and thanks for Go News for this. Couple of ground rules are gone. Again, this entire building is a no smoking zone. Just in case you want to smoke, you'll have to step out of the building and do that. The fire exits are right behind where you're sitting. So just in case of an emergency, we need to all step out of there. The washrooms are on your left after you step out of the hall. So thank you so much. I will now move on to the next session and introduce Josephine Mays-Punit. She's a junior researcher with RSF, and she's going to take you through the methodology and as to how and what we are covering tonight. Thanking you so much.
Thank you, Surbi. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome from my side. The past 6 months have been very intense, and we've been working with a very dedicated Data Leads team together to get where we are today to our database, which we will be presenting later on. I will quickly guide you through the main highlights. First, Dr. Michael Redeske is with us today, President of International RSF. Together with Said, CEO and founder of Data Leads, he will address the question, why media concerns media ownership concerns all of us, every single one of us. And in addition to that, afterwards, my colleague Nafisa from Reporters Without Borders, together with our team, today represented by Shivali and Raj, will go through the website to discuss the database, address challenges, surprises we came along, the findings which came up, and also the limitations of our studies, which are as interesting. And after all of that, we can all look forward to a very interesting keynote discussion on trust, media, and democracy. And before we open up the floor for discussion, our panelists will address media ownership, transparency, and control, and I really look forward for that personally. So let's have an exciting evening, and thanks for all of you to show up tonight.
Thank you so much, Josephine. I would now like to introduce and invite Dr. Mikhail Radusky, who is the president of Reporters Without Borders International, and he also co-founded RSF Germany 25 years back. So it's a privilege to have Dr. Mikhail Radusky here with us today. Can I please request you to come up on the stage? Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Great pleasure for me to welcome you here to this conference on behalf of Reporters Without Borders and our partner organization, Data Leads. As was already said, Reporters Without Borders is a non-governmental organization. We fight for the protection of journalists, for media freedom and freedom of information. Our concerns are the same they were 25 years ago when I started in Berlin together with 40 other colleagues. But the concentration has a little shift. When we started, this was 5 years after the Berlin Wall had fallen, after the Soviet Union had collapsed. There were new democracies in Eastern Europe. There was a lot of hope for more democracy all over the world. But at the same time, already wars had started. Tajikistan, we had the war in the Balkans commencing. So our first concern was to help journalists in danger and to fight dictatorships which exerted censorship against media. Nowadays we have the same problems, but we have new problems that come over. We observe new global threats for freedom of information and for independence of journalists, which are not, well, they are not entirely new, but become more important in the age of digitalization. Just to highlight two of our main concerns, the first is media concentration, and the second one is misinformation and disinformation. Around the world, the trend to media concentration seems to be inescapable. More and more financially precarious media become the prey to investors and to their interests. And these interests are often collected to politicians, to business, or they are backed by historical family bonds. In fact, people in power, rich people in power, they don't longer need to openly exert their power by repression through censorship or force. Instead, they use economic pressure rather than repressive forms. There are what we call silent takeovers, or sometimes it's called media capture, which means that rich and powerful people they own already media and they buy other media, they found new media, or with their financial resources they support other media in order to make them, to bring them on their line. And these actors mostly have political or economic interests which have little to do with the interest of journalists, of true journalism, to find out and to present the reality. It's rather propaganda. And this complex triangle of media, politics, and private interests put in danger the independence of the journalists, of the newsrooms. It creates pressure on the individuals who work in the field, and in many cases it leads to self-censorship of the journalist. There is a lack of financial transparency, including transparency on public spending for media. It prevails while legislation falls short to address these critical issues. My second point, misinformation and disinformation. The internet offers an abundance of information, but also lots of false information. So the journalistic content risks of being drowned in the middle of all these false or misleading information. And powerful actors may, and they really do, instrumentalize this disinformation, to clamp down the genuine news media. We at Reporters Without Borders were not alone to ask the question, what can we do about it? This question is debated in all academic circles, political, economic circles, civic angles. And the call for transparency of ownership structures and affiliated interests unites all these people. Information of media ownership is crucial. It's the basis for implementing effective media regulation. How could media authorities possibly address excessive media concentration and conflict of interests if they don't even know who is behind the media's steering wheel? A society really needs to have regulatory safeguards for diversity and for pluralism in its media system, as well as for a maximum independence of the journalists. Only then media are really capable to enable all citizens to be well informed by different sources and to know different opinions. This leads me to my third point. Information on media ownership is also important for every single person, for all of us. Media system shapes our daily lives more than ever. Through these online platforms we all use, it impacts the way we work and relax. It impacts how we inform and educate ourselves, how we engage in civic participation and social life. It's more decisive than ever. More decisive to know about media, just as it is important to know about the food we eat, where the food comes from, how it's produced, who sells it, and what are the legal benchmarks. In order to make conscious choices about our information diets, in order to judge the possible interests behind the presented facts and opinions, we, as the public, we need to know who's behind the media we are using. Reporters Without Borders did not only call for more transparency, we tried to deliver it, at least as a first step. And this is why we have launched the Media Ownership Monitor as a global project. It's financed by the German Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation. By the way, this is our only big project financed by government sources. Otherwise, Reporters Without Borders is mainly financed by individual donations. But thanks to this financial support, we have been able to publish results of our research in 20 countries, which have already been enumerated. And the results we are now presenting for India, they may serve as a starting point for discussion of all of you here, a discussion which should help to strengthen the economic and especially the democratic development of India. Let me close with a great thank you and with my compliments for the whole team, for the tremendous work during the last 6 months, for our RSF project managers, Nafisa Hasanova and Josephine Spanut, thank you, and especially all the team of data leads. They were wonderful partners of this important project. So I wish us an interesting conference tonight, and we are all curious to hear the results of the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mikhail. That was wonderful. And believe me, it was our honor and pleasure to have worked with RSF, and it was really a learning experience for all of us. May I please now invite Mr. Syed Nazakat, who is the founder and CEO of Data Leads and also led the media ownership monitor in India.
Thank you so much, Surbi. And it's really a pleasure hearing Dr. Mikhail. And we were discussing 2 days back in Delhi, why was this project so important for us? Like for the last 6 months, a whole team of data leads and RSF, we really worked quite hard actually. And the reason for that was very simple. Like, the information is the key, and the people behind that information are more important sometime in terms of understanding the nature of information they're providing to the people. And if we don't know the people who are behind that information and why they are providing it at a certain space, at a certain level, to certain crowd, we will not be able to make a decision whether this information is factual, right, or wrong. And the power of information overflow is so much that it influences us unconsciously. It influences our ideas, it influences our thinking, it influences our voting as well. And it's also true in a country like India, which is so diverse and big. People do not have same access to information. What we have in Bangalore, maybe that is not the level of information people in other parts of Karnataka will have, or in other parts of country have, and that makes a huge difference. And you will see during when the team will present the findings, how a single radio station in this country has a monopoly to have news as a broadcast. No FM station, no radio station in this country can legally produce news. State, one party or one politician can use it, but not everyone. And that makes huge difference because it is such a huge platform, almost reaching 90+% of population. Like people at home, people at office, people traveling. As a tradition, we used to all hooked up to the All India radio. And it was really a great, of course we knew about it, but the structure behind it. And Nisha Bambani, was so pleasure to have you a part of this project. And then what it really means legally was a huge learning. So in the last 6 months, what we did was that we went through thousands of papers, thousands of data sets. Almost all of it was, to our surprise, no matter how much we complain in India, was available. A lot of people often say, hey, there's no data available in India, we don't know what's happening. But luckily, at least for this research, we found the official data about companies, about owners, how much they own, how much they have, how much losses they're making. It was all available with the Corporate Affairs Ministry. And the records of, you can say, advertisement to some level, for at least for newspapers, at least for those who are getting money from the central government. Because in India, the state is the biggest advertiser. And that advertising money is also a great tool to control and a little bit arm twist when there's a need of that. So the governments use DAVP ads at the national level and the state ministry, information ministries at the state level use advertisements as a very useful tool to control media. And whatever research actually found out, and that was the bottom line of it, was the transparency is the key. It is fundamental. And if we have to really reach out and build relationship with the audiences, the transparency is the key. I don't think even today or next 5 or 6 years, there's going to be already a fundamental shift what audiences are asking. Like we have seen examples in Malaysia in terms of Malaysia Kini, in Korea, News Tapa, in Philippines, Rappler. They've been extremely transparent with their audiences, with their readers. How we collect this story, who collected it, what was the source of information, who is giving money to us, and who are our advertisers, and what is our ownership. They put it in public. I remember Wired, for example, quite recently when they started the foundation and the platform later, they were very open and transparent about who is funding them. And that actually helped the platform. I think that was good for Wire. And that is good for a lot of other organizations as well. Because when you build trust, people really say, okay, let's be part of your momentum. And we also saw the numbers really don't tell the story. See, when we go abroad and we really proudly say, I at least proudly say that, we are such a rich country and we have such a diverse media. We have 1 lakh plus newspapers. And I remember once in, I think, Brussels or somewhere, when they heard about 1 lakh or 100,000 newspapers, well, it was like huge. And TV stations, radio stations, we have 36,000 magazines in this country. And we feel, wow, that is huge diversity. Well, that is really huge. But the key point of this research was also numbers really don't tell you the story. 4 companies in Hindi, 4 media companies in Hindi circle enjoy 70% reach of market. 4 companies. And that is almost similar for television. That is worse for regional media, which my colleagues will come and share with you in Tamil Nadu, for example. 1 channel plus 2 channel capture the whole market. So what they produce, at what level they produce that, has a huge consequences for the public policy, has a huge consequences for democracy. And as a consumers of news, we don't really feel it. We feel like, oh wow, we have a diversity, but that is not there. Because there's also this illusion of choice, that you feel like you have a remote in your hand and you have an option to watch 40 channels, 30 channels, 20 channels, or maybe now 100 channels, and you feel like, no, if I don't like this channel, I will watch other channel. But when you look at eventually what all these channels produce you is actually a single story. They do not cover issues except 1 or 2 or 3, and they make sure the audiences watch that story again and again, again and again, every day, every morning, every afternoon, every evening. How on earth, in a country like India, where we have such a diverse population, and we have millions of reasons and millions of stories in this country, why is it that we only discuss 4 stories, 5 stories on TV, and we know what are those stories actually? What are the dangers of that? I see that there are huge consequences of that. When you watch one thing again and again, it influences you. Like a road show. A TV channel will run a road show for 5 hours. You change the channel, the same road show will be on another channel. You change the channel, it will be on another channel. And what happens because of that? The real stories disappear. As I said a day before, yesterday in Delhi, 500,000 people in this country disappear, commit suicide every year. And it's not a story. Karnataka, which is advanced, more prosperous, better governed than I think still than a lot of other states in the country, 35% plus medical equipment in government hospitals in Karnataka is dysfunctional. 35% medical equipment, CT machines, X-ray machines are not working in this state, and we don't see that coverage anywhere, because maybe it doesn't interest people who run who run the media. And the dangers are actually quite big, actually, beyond the stories. Because when you run a single story again and again, you rob people of identity. You stereotype. You feel like one person will always behave like this or behave like that. And you build a narrative. You build the consequences about that. And we're also saying, because we work quite closely with partners on fact-checking and verification in the last 1 year, and I'm happy to see many of our colleagues here from the Google News Initiative training. For the last 1 year, we have been engaged with a massive process of training editors and journalists in this country on fact-checking. So we have trained almost 9,000 plus editors and journalists on fact-checking. And we're training 8,000 more. And all, I think, hundreds of workshops which we did across the country, we also learned one thing. Why is fake news spreading? Who are the people behind that and why that is happening? And I think one of the reasons was because the mainstream media somewhere down the line was not covering the stories. And when they leave those spaces open, other forces occupy those spaces. And I don't think any civil society or any society or a democracy can function when there's a one single thought or one single opinion. And that is, I think that's what we are covering in this research, that how editorially also, it puts a big question mark on editorials as well. Like if 4 newspapers capture 70% of market and they have a one type of thinking when it comes to editorials, that's also quite dangerous for a society. And then for the both traditional and what we call new media, the challenge actually is that somehow we want to follow what the people say and what they like. If there are more Facebook likes to any video or any story, we think, oh, that is the great story to tell, no matter how frivolous that story is actually, because we go by click bites, we go by TRPs, which is again market forces which govern the media, not other way around actually. I personally, I think people still believe that the journalism is quite a huge responsible profession, and editors at the end of the day have a really big call to make. I remember attending a New York Times editorial meeting, and it's a very popular meeting, and I conclude with that. It's a very quite popular meeting at New York Times. Every day at 4 o'clock, they have an editors meet, in which almost 20 to 25 editors come together, including the owner of the New York Times, almost every day, and they decide what is going to be on the cover of New York Times tomorrow. And I attended the meeting twice, and I saw editors who have been there for more than 25 years doing the mirror practice before coming to the meeting, because they think it's a responsible job. And while we also understand that as a media, we see our role as reporters, editors, to some level, watchdog on authorities, on government, on state, and we love to ask questions by very nature, that is our job, but I think it is fundamentally important that we also be answerable to our audiences. Who owns us? Who controls us? How we decide stories? What stories do we cover? And why we are leaving some stories? We need to be transparent about it. And there's a huge global movement about it. I'm sure you're all aware about that, how things are working in terms of a huge push on membership models, of different models of journalism. I think that's really important. In future of journalism, we have a lot of challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges will be for us is being transparent. Who owns us? There's nothing wrong owning a successful, independent, powerful media company. But it's very important that we disclose that I'm the owner, I hold this much of share, or in this country, it's not illegal for a politician to own media. It's completely genuine. But he needs to say that I own this company. He doesn't need to have a shadow figures around. And we don't know who controls it. And we uncovered some of these people actually in this research. And I think that's really a treat for us as part of this team to understand how that works. And with these words, actually, I don't want to take too much time because the key part of our whole thing is actually the website which we are launching. And I request my colleague to take the conversation forward. And thank you so much for listening. Pleasure really to be in Karnataka. I really love Bangalore for a lot of different reasons.
All right, so then, as Sayed rightly said, that let's move on to the key session, the most awaited, the much awaited session for tonight, wherein we are introducing the launch of the website and the release of the online database of media ownership monitor in India. And for the release of the website, may I please now invite Nafisa Hasanova on stage. She's a senior project manager with Reporters Without Borders and is the project manager of Media Ownership Monitor in India. Thank you so much, Nafisa. Can I invite you on the stage? And joining Nafisa here is the data leads team, Vardarajan Anantakrishnan and Shivali Kaushik. Both of them have worked as senior researcher with data leads. Thank you so much. And Josephine, yes, of course, and Josephine from Reporters Without Borders. So here are the 4 key people here on stage, but I would also like to mention there are a lot of people who have not come here. Our team back in Delhi who've worked like the entire night for the last 6 months for the release of the Media Ownership Monitor today here with you. Thank you so much. Over to Nafisa and the team.
Namaskara mahaliyere matu mahaniyere. I hope that was not that bad. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nafisa Hasanova. I am the project manager with RSF, and I joined this project 3 years ago, and it has been an amazing experience so far. My journey in India started in November, 25th of November 2018, and I've had 6 months of an amazing journey. So I'll just introduce to you the background of MOM. MOM was initiated and developed by Reporters Without Borders, or Reporter ohne Grenzen, the German section, in 2015, and funded by the German government. The pilot projects were implemented in 2015 in Cambodia and Colombia, and since then we've managed 20 countries. So why do we do this? Why is transparency important? So the assumptions or the rationale behind the project is that transparency of media ownership is a sign of maturing democracies. Indeed, it is a prerequisite for a functioning democracy because any democracy requires an informed citizenry where media plays a crucial role. Media shapes public opinion, and public relies on media in their day-to-day decisions and once in 5 years decisions on who to elect into power and what laws should be passed. So pluralism in media, therefore, is quite important. It is a key to a functioning democratic society because, let's be honest, a bigger amount of views result in better debates, which result in better decisions. And in India, media pluralism is even more important because it is home to such a diverse group of people with a variety of living, senses of living. So what is MOM, Media Ownership Monitor? Media Ownership Monitor is a mapping exercise. We create a database, and you will get to see it. Oh, I have to show it. Right. This is the Media Ownership Monitor India website. So the website is a mapping tool. We put together everything that we can find out about media. Generally, in any society, some people know some things about media, but not everything. We don't know everything either, but we try to pull together everything that we can from public sources and put it all online in this database, which is very interactive and user-friendly, and usually comes in at least 2 languages, a local language and in English. Right. And in this website, we have pulled together 58 media outlets. We investigated over the past 6 months, 58 media outlets, 39 companies, and 45 owners. You can see through this website that we have the bit with a database where you can click through on the media and roam around the 4 different types of media that we have in the database: the print, online, radio, and television. And in the owners section, you can view the companies that own these media outlets and the individual owners, the actual human beings that are behind the companies. So MOM is also a measuring tool. We run a diagnostic of the entire media scene, including the legal framework, the economy, and political interrelations. And these bubbles here show you the risks to media pluralism in various domains, in economic, legal, and political domains. Above all, Media Ownership Monitor is a fact base for future discussions about what media in India should be like. It is for the Indian society, so the major target audience for us is the public, but everyone can find something interesting in here. We try to simplify as much as we can and speak a human language on this website to make it relevant to any layman and to any expert, an academic, a journalist. Everyone can find something useful for them. And now I would like to pass on to my team, and Raj will show you through the website a little bit and show you the database and share with you some of the anecdotes and findings that we have uncovered. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Namaskara, Bangalore. That's all I can manage. I don't know more of Kannada. So you heard the backgrounders from our seniors here who have been behind this website, this research project. They have told you why it's important, what we did, and the entire research project and how it was conducted and all of that. Now, this is what the website is, what this is all about. All the efforts of the past 6 months is culminated in this one website. So when you go to this website, what you will see, you have a menu here where you can choose the media on what you want to look at: radio, TV, print, and online. Then you can see the owners. Okay, here you can see the individual owners as well as the companies. And then you have context articles, then you have findings articles, and the rest. So while I like to take you through some findings during our entire research which happened. So when we started this entire exercise, it was a very exciting start. We thought, I'm a media person myself, I've been in television. So we thought, when we started this, we thought, oh, this will be a huge exercise. We will now know who owns the media in this country. We thought it was going to be one detective kind of, investigative kind of a thing. But what did we land up with? We pretty much landed up with the same answers as what we probably all of you know here. We know which company, which owner owns which media. So it was not a surprise. What was surprising is the very owners whom you thought owned a certain media outlet is not the direct owner when you start investigating that particular company. For example, my favorite example, I would say, we all know who owns ZTV. We all know that, right? But when you start investigating this particular company, the name Subhash Chandra doesn't open up in the first page. You have to look up about 30 companies to understand Subhash Chandra is behind all that. And there are about so many companies, so you suddenly flummoxed as to why a person whom the world knows as the owner of a channel or a network is hiding behind so many things. I don't want to use the word hiding, but yeah, he is kind of obscured behind all those companies. There are many examples in this, but I will take one more example, which is probably very relevant to this this place, Bengaluru, and we all know this channel TV9 Kannada, which is one of the big news channels here. But when we started investigating TV9 Kannada, we still don't have an answer as to who exactly the owner is. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. So here you go to TV9 Kannada. The one thing is, this is owned by a company called Ravi Prakash's Associated Broadcasting Company Private Limited, which is fine. But who owns that company? So in our, as a part of our research, what we did is we didn't stop at a place when we got a company name as the owner. The idea was to get to the individual owner, to a name, to a human being who owned that. Only that would lead us to believe who is the actual person. We were not satisfied with the name of the company behind an outlet. We needed to reach the person who owns it. It might be behind 40 more companies after that, but we still needed to reach that human being. So when we investigated TV9 Kannada, we reached a person called Srinivas Chintalpati Raju. Okay, he was the owner. But later, while we were continuing with our research, yeah, Srini Raju, he is the owner. According to our research, according to the databases, according to the MCA registry, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, where we get all the ownership data from, he is the owner. But in between, we came across media reports and with papers which are reputed papers. They said that in August last year, the ownership of this company has changed, and another company called Mega MEIL has taken over the ownership of this company. So we waited. We thought we wrote to the company asking for. We called them. We wrote to them asking for who's the actual owner. We never got a response. So we tried again in the last month to see with the new filing in the MCA registry whether the ownership has changed. Surprise of surprises, they had uploaded exactly the same ownership data which was last year's, even this year. But there are n number of media reports, and when you look at the sources in this page, you can read about articles in the media which says the ownership has changed. So at the moment, we are going by only what the official registry records say. So we are saying that Srini Raju is the owner, but who knows if he is or not, because the official registries are only reflecting what is the reality. But we don't know if he is or it has changed hands. So this was one interesting interesting finding. The other finding, which is again down south, is there are a lot of political owners, but political owners need not necessarily be a part of the political system. For example, Kalanidhi Maran, who owns the Sun Network. Okay, his news channels are not doing too well, but when you look at the Sun Network channels, Kalanidhi Maran is the owner, but we all know he is from the DMK family, Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam family. But what happens? We now know that he is not a part of the party. He doesn't hold any party position. Kalanidhi Maran does not hold any party position. Although being political outlet, it does not have any color, at least that's what he claims. He is completely apolitical. So these are some interesting findings which I thought I will share with you. So this is what we'll get. You get to read about all of this. One big thing about this entire research is this is completely research based and completely factual. There are no opinions in this, there are no inferences in this, and there are no judgments in this. We have put together only a section of facts which is available everywhere on official records. There is no, we are not extrapolating it to anything else. We are saying this person's owned this much and that is available on official records. So it was very interesting exercise that way. So when you go to the owners page, you can look up all the families, the entire families. Like I said, we want to, for this audience of Bengaluru, we have three very important outlets. One is HR Ranganathan's Public TV, one is Suvarna Kannada News, which is Rajesh Chandrasekhar Rajya Sabha BJP MP owned channel through Jupiter Capital. That is one, and of course the third is what we just spoke about, is TV9 Kannada. So we have looked into the ownership structures and how these companies operate. It is very typical to this channel. So as you see, all these names, these are the names we've gotten, we've arrived at through our investigation. These are the names we've arrived at, and all of these people, or some of them at least, have companies through which they hold these outlets. So that is the learning from this entire exercise. We have interesting instances when 251 members of one family are holding 93 point some percent in the entire outlet, which is Malayalam Manorama. There is no company, there is nothing else. The entire family, the extended family, the entire family tree, 251 of them hold 93 point some percent of the entire outlet. So it's a pretty interesting study that way. So now I'll pass it on back to Nafisa for the taking you to the key indicators of what we understood from the study. She will talk to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. So you had a chance to look at some of the faces of the Indian media owners. I'll take you to the findings page. And the key findings are the indicators. So we have two kinds of findings. One is the indicators of risks to media pluralism, and the other are narrative findings articles about some specificities about the media in India that we have observed. So based on all the data that we collected over the past 6 months, and that's a lot. That's hundreds and hundreds of files and documents and companies and business interests and affiliated political interests of individuals, and also very complicated names in very different states of India. What we have, what you can see now in front of you are the 10 indicators of risks to media pluralism. These indicators have been developed by the different European universities that deal with media pluralism on an academic level. So we took all of their know-how and we tried to visualize it as much as we can. So here, this would be probably the most academic part of the website. I'll take you to the media audience concentration. That is an economic indicator, we can say. We look at how concentrated the markets in India are. So we look at the market in a horizontal way, and when we say horizontal, then we talk about one particular sector. So how concentrated is the television market, the print market, radio market, or print I have mentioned, online market. So what we do here is we primarily focus on audience share, and for that we have to have the audience share. We have struggled with the television audience share because the broadcasters Broadcasters Audience Research Council, BARC, of India, did not provide the data. They do provide the data online. You can view it. You can view the weekly impressions of major television stations in different genres, different languages. But that information is unusable for us because all rights are reserved, and they've communicated that to us multiple times. We've met with them, explained our methodology, but unfortunately without any fruitful result. And but we were able to calculate for our own understanding. What we need to understand first is, in order to select the most relevant, influential media outlets, we have to know what are the media outlets that have the widest reach, and we measure that by audience share. And if we don't have the audience share, how would we select what television stations are watched by Indians? And what is also interesting is India presents a very special case. It's a one could speak about 29 countries put together in one. And how do you measure the market, which is so diverse? In television alone, you have various genres in which the market is completely independent, and you have also over 10 linguistic genres. Linguistic markets. So we looked at audience data in all of the only news TV stations in 10 languages. And we were able to select 23 media outlets out of those. We weren't able to use the audience shares on the website because all rights are reserved, but we were able to calculate on the basis of that the audience shares they have. And we were able also to calculate that in each individual market, linguistic market, with the exception of Hindi and Marathi, the audience is quite concentrated. And that would be, if you take 2 television outlets out of 5, they would have an audience share of above 50%, which, according to our methodology, indicates a high risk to media pluralism, because it is a highly concentrated market, because 2 owners potentially control half of the market or above, and in most cases it is above 50%. The same is visible in the print media. And with the print media, we can even show you a small table once I scroll down. So print media presents us with 13 linguistic markets, and only Hindi and English are considered national markets because they are consumed in more than one state. And so the audience data is also available for top 10, and we were able to calculate top 4 outlets out of top 10. For example, in Hindi market, you can see that top 4 media outlets reach an audience of 76.45%, which indicates a highly concentrated market. And each market in India, if you look at it, Tamil, Marathi, English, Malayalam, they all show the same trend, around 75%, 70%, 53, 59, 82 in Punjabi market. So, but if you put all of these together in one basket and you try to measure the audience concentration on an all India level, obviously you won't see the concentration, and the picture looks very colorful and very diverse and pluralistic, like Saeed mentioned. But we shouldn't be fooled by this, because these are all different markets catering to different audiences. And some of the media outlets, media companies, they cater different linguistic groups, which probably shows that their reach is far greater than in one language. For example, if you take Hindustan or Hindustan Times, the HD media would be reaching, have we lost? Okay. HD media would be reaching not only the Hindi speakers, but also the English speakers. And so is also with Ananda Bazar Patrika, for example, ABP reaches far greater linguistic markets. So it's very complex, the market in India. India is unparalleled. There is no other India on this planet. And yet what we have observed is the markets in print and in television are highly concentrated when you dive into regions. And in radio, obviously you have a monopoly of the state, because no private FM stations are actually allowed to broadcast news, only the unaltered versions of the state produced news, which isn't really independent news. So all of that indicates a high risk of media concentration in India. Our second indicator is measuring market share. Unfortunately, we were not able to calculate this indicator because the market data or the financial information was not always available. Some private limited companies are not required to submit their financial reports to ROC, to Register of Companies. And if you have bits and pieces of financial information but not the full basket, you won't be able to measure the market share. Which is not a big deal for us, I suppose, because financial information is considered sensitive information in various markets, and India is a competitive field, so we usually do not measure that indicator. If the information is unavailable, it's unavailable. Unless in audience, when the information is unavailable with audience data, then it is a high risk for us, because audience is the main important currency in the media. The regulatory safeguards, in detail, Nisha Bambani will be talking during the panel, but very quickly, regulatory safeguards in media ownership concentration and cross-media ownership concentration are quite high, because the legislation in India is not able to tackle this issue, because it doesn't define it, because it doesn't set any benchmarks or any thresholds. And if you don't know how to define a problem, you probably don't know how to tackle it either. So as a result, there is a highly concentrated market, and the regulatory safeguards are insufficient. So is also so are the regulatory safeguards in cross-media ownership concentration. So what we mean by cross-media ownership is when a media company or an individual owns several types of media, so television, radio, online, and print, for example. And you see that all over India. And you see that because it is not illegal, because it is not regulated, there is no definition of cross-media ownership concentration. However, there seems to be some regulation in vertical integration, but from what we see, it is not effectively implemented either, because again, you see Z Media owning Dish TV, and there are other examples of Sun Group also being active in distribution networks. One of the good news is the regulatory safeguards. So you have a green light there, which means low risk, and that is related to ownership transparency. And we have a low risk here primarily because we were able to find out the owners of practically all 58 companies, with the exception of one, and that is Scroll Media, because it is registered in the US, in Delaware, and we were unable to find the shareholding structure for that company. But in India, we were able to find them all, although it's important to note that even though information is available, information is not easily accessible, easily understandable for the public. The ownership structures are so convoluted and so complicated that one has to break their brains to try to calculate the shares, because at times dozens and hundreds of companies are involved in cross-sharing, cross-shareholding. So, however, all of the companies have submitted more or less recent annual returns with the list of shareholders, which enabled us to find out who owns what, and that is already a good news. There are some countries where you can't even find out shareholding structures of companies because there's no public records on those companies. Moving on, political control over media shows a high risk because there's quite a lot of direct ownership of media by politicians, again because the regulatory safeguards are missing. There is no restriction by law for a politician to own media, and the media owners are not required to disclose their political bias. And it's important to note that political affiliation does not necessarily or always translate into political bias. that is up to, we can't say that politically affiliated owners are now politically biased, because for that we have to run a content analysis, and we don't do content analysis, not within this project. But it could be a good idea for someone else to pick it up. However, proximity of media and political forces or powers usually indicate a risk. There's a potential of risk to media pluralism. And you can, in the indicator on political control over media outlets, you can view all of the list of owners who have political affiliations and what they own. Another thing we also measure is political control over media funding, and that is again a high risk, because information on public spending on media is not always available. There is some information available on DAVP spending on print, for example, at a central level, but it wasn't available on a state level, and we know that state level is very important. Equally, advertisement data was not available for television, neither on central level or state level, and that is all very important because this is all public money going into media, and there should be transparency, procedures, and a way for the public to follow on why and how media getting more funds or less funds from the state. And in some states or regions, like Said mentioned, public funding or state funding is very crucial for their survival and potentially is a force to manipulate content. So this is a look at our indicators. These are the findings. We have also some good news on net neutrality. The legislation that passed in 2018. It is yet to be seen whether this legislation will stand, but the fact that there is legislation is already good news, so the risks are medium. I will now give the floor to my colleague Josephine, and she will run you through the context and findings. Thank you very much.
Welcome again. So I will introduce you to two further levels of our website. One is the context pieces. I think we all agree that media does not exist in a vacuum. It is not isolated. It is influenced by a country's history and how did media happen in that? How were the first print outlets? With which motivation was behind them? How was politics involved back in the years into involving TV and print into the market and radio? How did it happen that the state is the only news broadcaster nowadays? So we cover all that in our history piece. To make it a little easier with all that information, we came up with some infographics. For instance, this computer. For instance, timeline on history of mass media in India, to have an overview on that and then go through the piece maybe if you're still interested. I hope so. And obviously all those pieces are highly interconnected, those context pieces. So you will find in society some information on the diverse, even if I don't even know if I can say there's one society of India because it's so diverse, from its income, language, religion, and all that influences again, for instance, how is media consumed? So we produced a piece on media consumption. How do young people consume how do young people in society consume media? That again, obviously, we get to technology. So the new technology coming up, how does that influence the market? How does it influence how is media consumed? And the media penetration in India in rural areas, highly influenced by, for instance, Reliance's Jio entering the market, influenced a lot the smartphone consumption. And all that is what media owners react to, what the market has to react to. We have pieces on politics, because it can't be missing. Where does the government spend its money? And to be a little analytic as well, we would constantly analyze our sample. We would put together, with lots of work, as you've just heard, our sample and go through it. What are the trends which we can see in it? And we would pick them up and analyze them in our findings pieces. So besides the indicators which just got introduced, for instance, political affiliations, my colleague has just explained them, how we measure them in the indicator, but we also go deeper into it. We try to analyze it, but since we are also just a small team starting with this, we also open up questions. We ask for you to go deeper, read it, and then carry it further. The radio news monopoly we have a larger piece on, because we just had one outlet to put into our sample, because there was only one news outlet. Which efforts have been made throughout the years by, for instance, TRAI to change that, the recommendations which have been made, how they changed throughout the years from all the other FM stations should be able to carry news to maybe they should be able to carry news just from the AIR but unaltered, and then this very interesting trial during the election period, which ends 31st of May, to carry unpaid news from AIR. So we try to analyze it, but we mainly also open up questions for you to carry it further. Then we also have a piece on let's go on national and regional media, because our sample showed we cannot just go with national media. In all the other countries Mom has been in and we've been working on, we would usually go with national media. Our sample would show that. And India surprised me and Nafisa on that. We had to go into the regional market because language is such a high influence. So we tried to analyze that, dig a bit deeper than just numbers and owners, and obviously link it to the owners, so there would be a contextual understanding. And then corporate ownership, one high trend, one strong trend in our sample, which is not just media has to run on some business model. So it also opens up the question, which business model could be better, could be different, which are there already, and can media be run like any other corporate? So we try to address these questions, and we also are happy if you go through it and carry on our work with more thoughts, more analytics. This is what the website it's for. It can constantly be updated. So I hope I got a little insight on our findings and context pieces for you. Thank you. I will give the word to my colleague Shivali now to introduce you to more infographics.
Thank you, Josephine, and good evening, everyone. I would like to run you through a few infographics which talk about a lot of interesting facts and figures. We've spoken about ownership structures that the various companies have, and a few of the figures in the television, print, radio, and online market. Now, like we discussed, that there are many people behind a single organization. They're mainly members of the same family who are running the business. This infographic, say on ABP Group, will give you an idea of who owns how much share in the company and through which company. So ABP is Anand Bazar Patrika. It has various publications, various famous, prominent publications in India. Ananda Bazar Patrika itself is a Bengali newspaper. They have the Telegraph, which is an English newspaper, and they have various news channels now. They have ABP News, they have regional channels, they have ABP Maja, ABP Ananda, so on and so forth. So like you can see that the total shareholding of the Sarkar family is around 99.9%. The direct shareholding is 78%, and through indirect shareholding, they own 21.9%, which is through ABP Holdings Private Limited. Similarly, we have other companies. We have the Times Group. We all know that the Jain family is the owner of the Times Group. How they own various shares is through the different members of the family. There are various companies, it's a very complex ownership structure in case of Bennett and Coleman. They don't have a corporate website running, at least till the last 1 month that we kept checking. The timesgroup.com website wouldn't open. It is an unlisted company. If it would have been a listed company, they go public, they publish an annual report which gives you a lot of information, which gives you a lot of data. But being an unlisted company, we had to run through a lot of MCA documents. Over here, I'd also like to mention that when we go through the Ministry of Corporate Affairs documents, we do see the filings that have come for the recent quarter or for the previous financial year. But when we open the shareholding structure of these particular companies, we see often that there are some files which are uploaded, which have a shareholding pattern maybe of, say, 2016 or 2017. So whatever figures we are showing over here, there is a possibility that it requires an updation. We are open to feedback. We have gone with the latest documents that we could access. Similarly, this is the shareholding pattern of Dainik Bhaskar. Dainik Bhaskar is one of the top 4 Hindi dailies, which is a part of the 76% audience share in the Hindi newspaper market. They also have a radio channel, and they have 9 online outlets. It is the Agarwal family which owns the Dainik Bhaskar. HD Media is a very old company. Hindustan Times, everyone knows, is owned by Shobna Bhartiya. You can see the complex structure through how many companies she is owning. The 51.43% of HD Media. In totality, she owns 74% of Hindustan Times Limited, but there are various organizations wherein one company is holding the other company, and she has shares either in one particular company or through another company. They have various outlets. Hindustan, the Hindi newspaper, is also one of the leading Hindi newspapers. We have an infographic on the Indian Express group. Over here, like you can see, we have Mr. Shekhar Gupta and his spouse, who jointly have a 9% share in the organization. Then we have the Goenka family, which holds a share in the Indian Express group. So jointly, Vivek Goenka and Anand Goenka hold 75% share in Indian Express Holdings and Private Enterprises Limited. And that's the reason why there is a direct shareholding and indirect shareholding, wherein the Goenka family finally has 90.96% share in the Indian Express group. I would also like to mention Mr. Shekhar Gupta is also the founder and editor-in-chief of The Print, which is an online news website. This is the ownership structure for India TV. Mr. Rajat Sharma and his wife, Ritu Dhawan, are the owners of India TV. They jointly have a share of 61.67%, and their organization is the Independent News Service Private Limited, which owns India TV. Down south, we have the Matrubhumi, wherein there are 2 families. In fact, there are more people also who own shares in the Matrubhumi newspaper. We have Mr. MP Virendra Kumar, who is a politician. His son has a major share in the Matrubhumi group. He has about 16.96% shares in the company. Then on the other side, you have the PV Chandran family, which also has shares in Matrubhumi. PV Chandran is the managing editor of Matrubhumi. He has a shareholding of 6.41%. His brother, who's apparently a prominent film producer and director down south, holds 5.83%, and the other family members also hold shares in the company. There was also another family, the Bhaskar Menon family, though Mr. Bhaskar Menon is no more, but his wife and daughter and son still hold shares in the company. We have the NDTV group, wherein Dr. Pranoy Roy and Radhika Roy own shares in the company. The direct shareholding of the Roy family is 32.27%, and the indirect shareholding is 29.18, which totals up to be 61.45%. We have another regional channel, which is News Live. The owners over here are the Sarma family, wherein Rinki Bhuyan Sarma, she is the chairman and managing director of the organization. She is running the company. She is the wife of Himanta Biswa Sarma, again a political affiliation, because he's been the Minister of Finance, Health and Family Welfare, PWD, Transformation and Development, Government of Assam, and he belongs to a strong political party. This is another interesting case study which we came across, which is the Reliance Group. Basically, we were studying Network 18, which has various channels. It has 2 news channels, one in English, one in Hindi, and others. It had a very complex structure wherein each of these companies have a certain % share in each other, and then there is the public, which has 25% shares, as you can see, in Network 18. And Network 18 and TV 18 are held by Reliance Industries, which has 100% ownership, and everyone knows that Reliance Industries is owned by Mr. Mukesh Ambani, which is one of Asia's richest man, and he has a lot of other businesses apart from media being just one of them. We have the ownership structure of Republic TV, wherein Mr. Arnab Ranjan Goswami is the managing director and the founder of Republic TV. He is the owner of the company ARG Outlier Media Asia Net News Private Limited, and he has 70% share in the company, along with his wife and other partners. Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who is a prominent figure, who owns Asia Net News, had initially invested in Republic TV. That's the reason why we have him mentioned over here. And then TV Today Network, everyone knows Mr. Arun Puri is the owner. We here show how the shareholding pattern is amongst the family members, especially his wife and his children. Z Media has already been discussed by my colleague Raj about Mr. Subhash Chandra being the owner of Z Media Corporation. As you can see, again, a lot of cross-holding, a lot of organizations through which they have shares and which total up to be quite a considerable number of shareholding in that particular company. Okay, and a few more interesting facts and figures. We've talked about the various newspapers that are there, the advertisements that the newspapers are getting through DAVP. This is an infographic on that. The Hindi language was seen to have the maximum readership with 45.45%, followed by Tamil, which was 8.58, and then came English at 6.11. However, if you see the language-wise advertisements that the newspapers get, it is primarily Hindi and then followed by English, and the other regional channels, regional newspapers follow. We have a few infographics on the history of mass media in India, which talks about how we evolved from the first newspaper to being digitalized and having 118,239 registered publications, over 380 news channels, so on and so forth. We have a few figures on the TV viewing households, how many million view television through cable, through DTH, through free TV, and through the HITS platform. The total number of TV viewing households is 183 million as for 2017. This has been discussed by my colleague Josephine. One of the last infographics on the viewership of different genres in India. Our research is primarily on the different news channels and newspapers, the radio channel, which is primarily AIR, because that's the only one which disseminates news, and online websites, which include not only the prominent media companies who have an online version, but also standalone websites like The Scroll, Print, Quint, so on and so forth. But it's important to mention over here that the viewership is mainly seen for the general entertainment channel, which is 54%, and news has just 7% of the share. I would now like to run you through the About section. Like Nafisa mentioned, we have a set pattern of the methodology. You can go through the methodology is given on the website to better understand of what are the parameters that have been covered. We have an FAQ section as well, which answers, we've tried to answer most of the questions to understand what Media Ownership Monitor does and how we do it. However, we would be happy to have your feedback and help us update this particular section. If required, we would be adding more questions to this. Well, with this, I would like to thank everyone, and now I would like to open the session for a few question and answers that my team and I would like to answer in case you have any. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yes.
Political affiliations measured only by whether a person, the owner is a member of the party or member of the legislature or otherwise as well?
1 minute.
Well, it does make a difference because, sorry. See, like Nafisa mentioned, it's not that we are saying that there would be a direct influence on the content of the news in terms of whether it is television or print, but yes, there is a possibility of being influenced.
No, so the political affiliation is measured only by whether the media owner is a member of a particular party, or are there other measures of political affiliation?
Yes, it is basis this, that if they're a member
Sure.
of, they have been a member in the past, because we feel that the influence. Yeah, sure.
So political affiliations are all affiliations. When we reach to an individual, we understand whether he belongs to a political party or is an individual or a business person, all that. So what you're asking is whether political affiliation is decided by who the owners are. So I would, my standpoint is only this: when I reach a person, whether he's politically affiliated to a party, is he an active member of a party, that is all that will decide whether the outlet has a political affiliation or not.
Thank you.
Any other question?
May I add to this? We have also included Doordarshan and what is the Hindi version of Air? Yeah, Prasar Bharati and the radio station also among the outlets that we would consider as having political affiliations because of their proximity to the government. So it is nuanced, it is difficult, and in every country we have to redefine what political affiliation means because the political links are different in every country. In countries where, for example, it is illegal for a politician to own media, you wouldn't have these direct links, but you would have other nuanced ways in which they control media, and then we would have to define it accordingly. Thanks.
Studies done with other media organization.
So there will be one major update each year. So we also take into consideration if someone comes back to us and has something to add or to correct, or if just simply the media landscape changes because the surroundings change, technology changes, business models might change. So we do update, and there is one major update each year.
Also, the outlets which have been selected have been selected basis their reach and how they influence public opinion. One little addition I would like to do is we have taken only the news channels and the news outlets whether print, television, or radio, or online, as our subjects of study. We have not gone to entertainment and or we have not gone to travel, cooking, on all infotainment genre as well. We have not gone that because we believe it's a belief that only news can reach a lot of it can influence public opinion, and that is the point of our study.
Uh,
News aggregators are.
We generally don't look into news aggregators because we look at what is a media outlet. For us, media outlet has to have at least an editorial team, some sort of production of news as well. Such as Yahoo.com and other aggregators are just automatized services. We don't look at them really. Thanks.
I have a question. So this reach figure, here I am, on the right one. So the reach figures are the market share for the television and the print. How have you calculate the market share and the source of data? Because there's a lot of difference between different sources unless you take from the BARC or IRS and Audit Bureau.
Yeah, so for the print, we've picked up the data from IRS. It is the IRS 2017.
2017.
Yes. For television, like we had already mentioned, we could not get the required data from BARC, and the data that was available on BARC was not in a usable format because we need to calculate the audience share, and the data that they present on the website is not in terms of the way we require or we would like to utilize the data.
So you want to the time share versus or the market share kind of analysis? I mean,
what we do distinguish between market share and audience share.
I see.
So for us, audience share is obviously it is a currency in the media, but for us, audience share is mostly shows the power over influence, the public opinion forming influence of the media outlets. So we measure that bit. The market share we usually look at financial data. So if we don't have the revenues of all, let's say there's 10 companies in a country, if we don't have revenues on all 10, we won't be able to measure the market share of all these 10. And we had inconsistent data in terms of financials. Listed companies had their figures, but private unlisted companies didn't have their data.
So this the financial report is the basis of your considering the market share.
Yeah, the market share, as you could see in the bubble, which is gray, is non-computable in a country where financial information is not available, which is the case in India. So you see it here. Media market concentration. We explain it here that generally our methodology says that top 4 owners having a market share of above 50% would alert us with a high concentration. But we aren't able to calculate that because we don't have the revenue data on all companies that we have looked at.
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
Sorry, and the last thing that I wanted to mention is that no study can do anything unless you set certain limitations and certain boundaries, and our study had also boundaries. We looked at primarily, like Raj mentioned, news media, because we were looking at media that shape public opinion. We're not saying that entertainment doesn't, and in India entertainment probably does, but our methodology is strictly looking at news media and news outlets. So we looked at that, and that's why radio has only one outlet. You do have other FM stations which produce music, maybe not produce, but air music. But we look at only news outlets, and also we don't do content analysis. And what was the last one? Sorry. And we don't also look at the international giants like Facebook and Google, because this is a media ownership transparency exercise, and we all know who owns Facebook and Google, so we don't need to waste our time on that. Although Facebook and Google do present challenges for Indian market, but that is a different study. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much, team. This actually wants. I think we should give them a huge round of applause in here. This was a lot of work. This was actually a lot of work. All right. So now, moving on, sir, to the next session here today is the keynote, where it's an honor and privilege to now invite Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, who is in here with as our keynote speaker. Dr. Qureshi is joining us here with his better half, Ms. Ila Sharma, a former election commissioner of Nepal. It's a pleasure, ma'am, to have you here with us, with sir today. Dr. Qureshi joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1971. After holding several key positions, he rose to become the 17th Chief Election Commissioner of India, the world's largest democracy. He introduced various innovative electoral reforms, including setting up of a voter education division, which brought a revolution in voter participation in India. He is well regarded for his special contributions in social sector reforms as well. He has traveled widely to represent India at international conferences and dialogues. In his earlier career, he has also served as Director General of Doordarshan. He has been a member of the Board of Advisors of International Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance in Stockholm. He was also a member of the Advisory Committee to assist and advise the Global Commission on Elections, Democracy and Security, and he headed by Mr. Kofi Annan. He is also the author of An Undocumented Wonder, The Making of the Great Indian Election. We welcome you, sir, for a keynote address on building trust in media and democracy. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be here. The keynote address actually seems to be the previous session, because everything they said is going to ring in our ears, and we'll keep on referring to them. When I was hearing them, I was actually going down memory lane. Although I'm an IAS officer, but almost half of my career I spent with the media. Very early in my career, with 3-4 years of service, I was the Director of Public Relations of Haryana with the tall leader, Jat leader, Mr. Devilal. And I was a successful DPR, which became my liability, because whenever I wanted to get out of it, they won't let me go. And within 2 years, I got fed up and disgusted with the job, because I realized that what was public relations and media was nothing but bandobast and arrangement for tea, coffee, samosa and jalebi for the press. And the expectation of the chief minister from the media was also that every day, first thing in the morning, he should see his tape cutting or laying of a foundation stone, and if that did not appear in the newspapers, his DPR was a flop. He was not doing a good job. So balancing the two roles was quite difficult. I was increasingly getting fed up of the behavior of some of the media persons. Not only they were not so professional about their job, the way they would be touching one samosa and the second one to see whether it is hot enough and pick up the third. So it was disgusting. But then I had to do it with a smile, the plastic smile for 2-3 hours, particularly the time at 11 to 1 when they used to come, became a pain in the neck. But I did realize that actually information and the media has a much, much bigger role to play. It can make a difference to people's lives. And in any case, after 4.5 years of forced posting there, later on I was posted as Director of Social Welfare. And that was an accident, because my name was sent as DC Chandigarh, which takes 2 months to be cleared by the Government of India, and in between that to find me some slot, and social welfare was the job given to me. I got condolence messages from my friends, because that was considered a lousy job. Those who were very jealous of my high-flying days, because as a very young officer at DPR, you're very close to the Chief Minister, you have access to his bedroom, and no, not to be misunderstood. But the fact that you have full access, 24-hour access to him, made you a very powerful, a very important man. So those people who were jealous, they said, oh, serves him right, now let us see how he does. Then I realized that social welfare was the best job I ever had in my career. Of course, that was the beginning. I hardly had any career record, because that is where I could make a difference to people's lives. And I found information and media had the biggest role. For instance, a mother caring for the child, we found the practices of child care were abysmal. Now, which mother would like to her child to die or will be malnourished? What we found was the information gap. So later on in Government of India, I went looking for a job. I was Deputy Commissioner of Gurgaon. Those days Gurgaon was particularly important. Even now it is important as multinational capital of India. But there, then also because of the proximity to the national capital, it was extremely important. So anybody who was somebody in Delhi had some interest in Gurgaon, and as a result of my posting there, I had some clout. Because of which I could have got a good posting of my choice if I really wanted. I got to know that a post of a Deputy Secretary, Minister of Social Welfare was lying vacant. I was desperate to go to Government of India. Then when I went there, Mr. Ved Marwa, Police Commissioner, later on Governor, was the boss. And he said, you know, we had asked for a panel which had come from the Ministry of Personnel. We sent it back. Go and talk to the desk officer, Mr. Pillai. I still remember the name, and ask him, request him to send your name and we'll select you. Now, I went to Mr. Pillai and I said, Mr. Pillai, can you send my name to Minister of Social Welfare? So he looked up and down for 2 minutes as if I'm a crazy guy. I said, what happened? Why are you staring at me like that? Did I make a mistake? He said, no, sir. You are the first person who has come asking for the posting in social welfare. Otherwise, people come and say that don't send the name and withdraw the name from there. The first thing I did in Social Welfare Ministry was to prepare a proposal. When I saw the program, to prepare a proposal for setting up a media division. My secretary, Mr. R.P. Khosla, was from UP Cadre. He had been Chief Secretary, one of the finest persons, a nephew of famous Justice G.D. Khosla, who is well known in media circle. So he liked the idea, whereas Planning Commission had been rejecting it, because the power of the media was to be exercised through in that ministry, because we found that 90% of the program that we had in that ministry were actually to attack the mind. And how do we do that except through the media? So that is the media, that is the public relations, that is the information we should be talking about, and not the samosa and the jalebi which we were dealing with. So, but then that was the beginning of my relationship with media, which continued. I got interested in the subject. I was planning to do my PhD and I picked up a subject from there, social marketing, which is nothing but the communication, behavior change communication. Many people have not heard of it. Many people don't understand what it is. In one line, if you can sell soap, you should be able to sell an idea. So whatever goes into soap selling and any marketing, all of that, if you use, get into the mind of your audience. Don't consider him or her as a beneficiary, but as a consumer who is the king. Then only your communication will be successful. I went on to do my PhD in social marketing, and that was again my very deep exposure to media. Later on, I was posted as DG Doordarshan, the biggest media network, television network in the world. At that time, 27 channels. But then I also saw the manipulation of media by the media owners. Why the racket called TAM and or TRP? They were showing us our market share as 1.5%. Whereas the reality was that 52% of India had no satellite channels. There the reach was 100%. and all of the channels had about 100 or 200 channels had access, has control over 48%. Now 100% in half of the media and 2% in the other half of the media. How much is my reach and share? 51%. They were bent on showing up my share as 1%. And that definition of how much percent will decide the advertising support that we get. At that time it was just 8,000 crores and everybody was eyeing that pie, including me. But then the media bias would not go very deep into this, and they will be carried away by the false projections which were being made of the market share. They would be patronizing those channels. I went door to door fighting this TAM racket, and partly succeeded in convincing people that there is some racket going on. There used to be initially two agencies. One was called TAM, the other was called InTAM. They were always giving different figures. So TAM bought InTAM, like the bigger fish buying, and they used a very interesting jargon. There used to be two currencies, now there is a single currency. Even in Doordarshan, the people were using this term, two single currency. Oh, now we have two single currency. It sounded like a very interesting expression. To me, this was like the Dawood Ibrahim and the other criminal Gauli coming together in alliance. So otherwise they were reporting each other's whereabouts to the police. And once they get together, you can't catch them. InTAM was swallowed by TAM. Single currency was the word to fool us. And as a result, the discrepancy between the two ratings which was coming to the fore disappeared. And that is how they were really defrauding. Now, there was one conference of, every year there is this media conference in Bombay. What is it called? Frame. Yeah, I attended that, and I told there was an audience of about 500 people. And Aaj Tak was the channel which was making a presentation. I was in the audience. The big owner of the director general of the biggest network in the world was in the audience, and some people were on the dais because they were the fastest channels, सबसे तेज. So I said, "Waqi, genuinely they are सबसे तेज." With my market share, my audience share that week was 93%, and Aaj Tak was 4%, and I said, "With 4%, they are pulling wool over your eyes and calling themselves sabse tez." Really sabse tez hai, because they are here and I'm in the audience. Now, there is a lot of manipulation. There is a lot of I don't want to use the word hanky-panky, but manipulation which goes on. Now, media is considered the fourth pillar of democracy. Absolutely true. Its role in the freedom movement is enormous. We cannot talk of a freedom history without the history of our media. Vernacular press had a great power, great role, and radio was very powerful for about 50 years. Initially, ladies and gentlemen, I had written a speech for the first time in 30 years, but I thought it was not a good idea. So I just made some notes after hearing the experts here. Now, it was mentioned, I think Mr. Nadakat mentioned media explosion. We have 110,000 publications of all kinds in all languages. We have 2,000 large dailies, and from the monopoly of Doordarshan, we have 902 private channels. So that is one part of the media explosion. Now, we're coming to democracy and election. For Election Commission of India, we have considered media as a great ally. Normally, it is a watchdog, and we expect it to a watchdog of Election Commission also. If we do not conduct ourselves well, they should point it out, they should write against us. We had that kind of stand. They helped us a lot in our voter education program, which was mentioned in my introduction. We set up a voter education division in 2010 to get more people involved in democracy. When I came up with the proposal, because of my media background, I was ridiculed. I was opposed. They said educating voters is not the election commission's job. Your job is just to conduct elections. I said nothing doing. It's very much our job, because if we do not educate people and they don't turn out to vote, there were constituencies where only 15 or 20, 25% people are turning out to vote. Suppose 20% people turn out to vote. Their votes are divided over 10 candidates. A candidate with 10% vote or 15% vote becomes the winner. 85% people have not voted for him. Now, his legitimacy will come into question. Or the very dangerous proposal of compulsory voting will come. You know, there is so much of so low turnout, let us have compulsory voting as they have in Australia or in Singapore. Well, interesting. Now, compulsion and democracy don't go together. Your right to vote includes your right not to vote. And I used to hear about Australia. I asked my counterpart in Australia, how is your experience? How is it doing? He says, very bad. So there is a fine of $20 for non-voting. And to collect those $20, they end up spending $2,000 after 3-4 years of litigation. And at the end of the day, I said, what is your turnout? After all that, he said 90%. You know, when I was talking to him, at that time, a few weeks before that, we had elections in Tripura, where we had reached a turnout of 93.4% pyar se, with love, with education, with persuasion. And to be told that we should follow the Australian model of compulsory voting. And Australia is the size of Haryana, and Singapore is of the size of Karol Bagh. Now, what do we learn from these two countries? Because our own model is perhaps worth emulating. So, we set up voter education division. We have not looked back. The very first election was Bihar, highest turnout in history. More women turn out to vote than men, despite their adverse numbers. Do you know what is the gender ratio in India? 940 women for 1,000 men. Despite their adverse ratio, but their turnout in the election became higher because of media, because of voter education, because of the power of positive power of media we wanted to use. Then we declare that media is our ally. They are our eyes and ears. And if they criticize us, they are welcome, because they were the first to report model code of conduct violations. We had set up thousands of teams, over 75,000 of our cameras and photographers roam around. You know, that is our army capturing what's happening on the ground. But then there are media channels, their cameramen are also roaming around. They're showing the same thing as we want to see. I remember once around midnight or after midnight, Rajdeep Sardesai called me. Sir, have you seen Gandhi, Varun Gandhi? Okay, Varun Gandhi's speech, did you hear Varun Gandhi's speech where he was saying that I'll cut the hands and head of such and such community people if they speak like in a particular language? I said, no, I didn't, I missed it. He said, sir, please wait, I'm playing it again for you, just watch. So he played and it was really, really shocking. I said, Rajiv, can you send me the CD in the morning? Because we would like to take action on that. So next day morning, we had a full commission meeting and we found that it was very offensive. We filed an FIR and the guy was in jail for 10-15 days. He never has used that kind of language. Now the first person to bring it to our knowledge was the media. So to call them our eyes and ears actually is very, very appropriate. So then there is another dimension which is very serious for us and democracy and for election, the expenditure. When I took over as the CEC in July 2010, In my inaugural press conference, I gave myself two challenges. One was voter apathy, which I just referred to. The other was the role of money power. Money power is vitiating the purity of India's election. Although there is a ceiling on expenditures, currently 70 lakhs for parliament, but we know anecdotally that 7 crores or 70 crores are being used. And one reason is that while on individual candidates there is a ceiling, on political parties there is no ceiling. As a result, my party they spent 10 crores on me. So now what is the logic and purpose of a ceiling? Anyway, most of this expenditure is going on the media. And media also hikes up its rates those days because they realize without the media, these guys, the politicians have no chance. So they started this something called paid news. You know, the treaties, they call them treaties, is a very interesting name. That they will sign a treaty with a political party or a candidate that you pay me 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, I'll write so many editorials, so many newspapers showing you all winning. If you give me double that, I'll demolish your rival and opposition candidate. But initially, some honest politicians reacted against it. They said, look, we don't want to get into this trap, keep us out. You know what happened? The least was that they blacked them out. And the worst was they started attacking them, painting them black every day. So perforce, willy-nilly, each political party fell in line and they started buying those packages and they fell into that trap. Now, money power in election, where media is a big player, is playing havoc with India's democracy, and that is something we have to be concerned about. And I have often said that the expenditure in election has become the mother of all corruption in the country. When you spend crores, you have to raise crores. And how do you raise crores? By hook and crook. So it has become a vicious circle which needs to be handled. Then now 2-3 other things like television has become very confused about its watchdog role. Normally it should be a watchdog on the government, against the government. But now many of them have become the lapdog of the government. If you see those channels, they are not questioning the government about their performance or lack of performance. They are questioning the opposition. Look, your leader 50 years ago did not do what he should have done, or 40 years ago he did not do what you have done. Why should we wait for you? That is how these channels are behaving. Some of them were analyzed very beautifully here a little while ago. Now, in this age of paid news, where the integrity of media is in greatly suspect, we really don't know what to make of the media. The kind of the channels that we have, they remind us of yellow journalism of the earlier days. I remember when we were in the district, we'll come across newspapers with total print order of 500, of which 5 were sold and 490 were just thrown away. There used to be a very standard column on the first page. For a scandal in food and supplies department, watch this space next week. And with that newspaper under their arm, they will go to those guys and blackmail them, extort some money out of them. On a much larger scale, I think our TV channels are doing exactly that. There is a fear that the fourth estate, the fourth pillar of democracy, is becoming the fifth column of democracy, and we have to analyze that phenomenon and do something about it. We hear about a lot of debate about opinion and exit polls. We are against opinion and exit polls. Although as a communication person and a PhD in communication, I should not be. The research is good, is very good, it should be done. provided it is honest, for an honest purpose. You may not know, Election Commission itself does its own research. We do our own opinion poll very quietly, not to mislead ourselves or not to cheat you, but just to understand what is it that people want. We do, before every state election, we do what is called KABP surveys, knowledge, attitude, behavior and practice surveys, to find out what are the gaps. Why, for instance, youth do not come forward and vote. Most important political power they have and they don't use it. At the time when we started this, only 12% youth of 18 to 19 were registering as voters. We investigated and we found that the knowledge gap or attitude. Number one, many did not know that 18 is an age where they can vote. And you become 18 on specifically what date? It has to be 1st of January. If they knew that, what is the process and procedures? They did not know that. If they knew 1 and 2, they had great contempt for politicians. Sab neta chor hai. All politicians are corrupt. That is what they used to say, which is dangerous for democracy, because all leaders are not chor. We have become a virtual superpower thanks to good political leadership. But we had to change that attitude. And how will we do that? Through the media. But media, instead of getting into these things, were more into paid news. And how did we discover paid news? Media, the journalists themselves. Good thing is, the movement against paid news was led by the journalists themselves, the professional journalists. They were the persons who were indulging in it were the owners, which is being analyzed here. The owners wanted that, but the professional journalism didn't want to get into that. Reporter is different from the marketing the guy. He is not interested in into the money business. Now, if both candidates have bought the package, you will find on the same page, Mr. X is winning by huge margin, and on the other side, Mr. B is winning by a bigger margin. The both opposite candidates are winning because both have bought the packages. That is how ridiculous it became, and that is how we got to know. Mr. Prabhat Joshi and Mr. Kuldeep Nayyar of Indian Express and Jansatta, they brought us a whole bundle of newspapers when it was first exposed. Anyway, we are trying to find something about, to do something about it. We set up some guidelines. And then we came across, after Bihar, next election was Tamil Nadu, where we found that these media owners were politicians themselves. Now, how to account for their expenditure? They said, this is our own channel, we don't charge anything, so they were not showing it. So we set up, no, even if it is your own channel, after all, there must be a rate card. You would be charging others, so as much as you will be charging others, you have to show as your expenditure, because there is a ceiling on expenditure. So we try to deal with that problem. I don't know to what extent we have been successful. Now, because of all that I'm mentioning, although I said in media are our eyes and ears, they are our ally, but at the same time, their reputation worldwide. Global State of Democracy Index, which is brought out by International Idea of Stockholm, which was referred to, that shows that there is a steady decline of media integrity. World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders shows India is 140 out of 180 countries. 140 out of 180 countries. And we have slipped 4 positions in the last 2 years. 2 years, 2 positions every year. So we have to be concerned about. Now, having said all that, what is the way forward? A lot of times I've heard the word regulation. Regulation, yes. The more powerful you are, the more you need to be regulated. So what kind of regulation can we look at? Government regulation, certain no. In the self-regulation, very utopian, it may wishful thinking, it's just not possible, it doesn't happen. Somebody may try, like Hindustan Times, Mint have their guidelines, which are excellent. But at the same time, you cannot control yourself as objectively, because that's humanly impossible. Then independent regulation, which perhaps is an ideal thing. So we should look at that. We don't have any regulator at all of any kind in the country, but in UK there is an independent regulator. And finally, I'll finish on a model which we have hit upon, maybe by accident. National Broadcasting Standards Authority of India, of which I am a member at the moment, and Nisha has been there much longer. Now, this is a regulatory authority, National Broadcasting Standards Authority. It's an authority for TV channels, TV news channels only, not entertainment channels, news channels. And as was mentioned that you're more, the entire presentation was on news channels for a specific reason, because you don't want to go into entertainment. Now, this authority was created by NBA, which is National Broadcasting Association, or News Broadcasters Association. Now, it is NBA is a kind of a trade union, it's a professional association of news broadcasters. They set it up. So, in a way, it is a self-regulation, because we are their creation. Now, the first person they got to set it up was Justice J.S. Verma, the former Chief Justice of India, like of whom is very difficult to find in 50 years. He said, look, give me full free hand. I come as chairman only if you give me free hand, and I will brook no interference. You will not look into our working. And then he set about, made the guidelines, and very beautiful guidelines. And I've been associated with it for 3, 4, 5 years, and I see how independent it is. Not the slightest interference, they dare not. In fact, there was one occasion when they were very unhappy with our judgments. You know, some of the top channels, when they were fined 5 lakh rupees, 5 lakhs they can afford. But the bigger fine was that for at the same prime time, for the 1 week, they will have to show their regret and sorry. At the time, you know, we made that statement and we apologize, we'll never do that again. That was most insulting and humiliating, but they were made to do that. So after we passed many such judgments, they got so upset they called a meeting, almost to, you know, reprimand us. Our chairman was a little too polite and gentle. Before chairman could open his mouth, I said, if you come to tell us and to question our judgment, we pack up and go. You can't tell us what kind of judgments we give you. So, and the fact that you have created this beautiful model, you want to destroy it yourself. You want to tell, can you imagine government calling the Chief Justice of India and all the judges to tell them, look, your judgments are not very good these days? So immediately they backtracked. No, this is not why we came, there was something else and all that. But for the last 10 years, and I think Nishi in her presentation will confirm what I'm saying, that this is a very good model, which is self-regulation half, independent regulation other half. Perhaps this is the kind of model we should look at, debate and discuss more. And with these, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving him an opportunity to go down memory lane. And I hope that this will become a turning point in the media debate that goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, we should give him a big round of applause. And it was really interesting to hear your views, your experiences down the memory lane. Thank you so much, really. So now moving on to the next session, and the last session of the day is a panel discussion on media ownership, transparency and control. The session will explore questions related to media ownership, how the existing media laws regulation work and not work, and threats to independent media, what challenges lie ahead of changing media ownership models, and more importantly, how media can renew its trust with the audience. So may I now please invite our most eminent panel here. To begin with, may I invite Ms. Kanchan Kaur, who is the Dean of the Indian Institute of Journalism and New Media, Bangalore, and the ex-assessor of the International Fact-Checking Network. Kanchan is also moderating our session today. Welcome, Kanchan. Now, Ms. Nisha Bambani, who is a Supreme Court lawyer and also the legal advisor to the media ownership model in India. Yes, please. Thank you so much. The next is Mr. Samar Halarankar, is editor of India Spend and a former managing editor of Hindustan Times. Welcome, Samar. Mr. Josie Pulayan Thuruthel is the founder and editor-in-chief of Factor Daily. Welcome, Josie. And last but not least, Mr. Nitin Pai, who is the co-founder and director of Takshila Institution, an independent center for research in education and public policy. Thank you so much, panel.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for sitting down to this after that comprehensive, stunning, and damning information on media ownership in media in India, and also that very clear painting of the scenario by Mr. Qureshi. I'd like to start with my favorite data. In 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 companies. In 2011, it came down to 6 companies, and if data by the Media Ownership Monitor is any indication, it's now 4 companies. In Britain, it's even worse. Just 3 companies dominate 83% of national newspaper circulation, and 2 companies own nearly half of all commercial analog radio stations. That's BBC and Sky. Now, both are capitalist economies, developed, have other freedom of press laws that somewhat protect the editorial from owners, and the key word is somewhat. All said and done, we are a developing economy that's still making up its mind on whether we want to be very clearly libertarian or part welfare, part socialist state. The government has a very clear stronghold on the media through advertising and through laws. However, in the past few years, especially since liberalization, we've seen that more and more business houses and political parties find it profitable in more ways than one to own media houses. Media houses that own no other business interests are very few and far between, and media funded by independent trusts is mainly online. So one is not really sure if we can say how influential, say, India Spend is in shaping discourse, or for that matter, The Wire or the Swarajya website, all of who owe somewhat to the Independent and Public-Spirited Media Foundation. We've had few regulatory frameworks on cross-media ownership, or even political or corporate ownership of media. The TRAI tries to make an effort, but doesn't get very far. So how does this affect the real business of media, which is basically to provide information that is true, transparent, fairly unbiased, and helps the audience take informed decisions? This is supposedly done by, crucially speaking, truth to power. Should the social responsibility aspect of the media overrule the profit-making one? How do these various funding models, whether it's private or public, whether it is crowdfunding, independent trusts, etc., affect editorial freedom? How does advertising and even subscription interfere or help media freedom? Integration of production and distribution of media is another point to be looked at. And we hope to find some solutions. This is a lot to talk about, but we'll just start with at the beginning. The ground for why ownership matters has already been laid by the Reporters Sans Frontiers. So now let's see how it actually pans out in reality. So Samar has worked with both mainstream media and non-profit media, and he'll speak about how ownership affects editorial and journalistic transparency.
Okay, I'm not going to make a speech or anything of the sort, so we just keep it a conversation. But I only want to say, when I was with the Hindustan Times, at that point of time, it used to cost about 8 rupees 50 paisa to produce an issue edition of the paper, which used to be sold for about, in those days, 1 rupee 50 paise or 2 rupees. That, I think, is the heart of the problem with independent media, with the media in India. The model is advertising-driven model. If there is a problem in the advertising, everything starts going downhill, and that's when your independence is immediately compromised. And I think the turn really began in 2008 when there was an economic downturn, and the media industry has not really recovered from that. And that has allowed what has happened is that that model came under so much pressure that it has allowed political parties and others with special interests to make deep inroads into the media, to the point we are now where, as Dr. Qureshi said, that the fourth estate, I thought that was a very good line, the fourth estate are about to become fifth columnists. And that, I think, was the start of it. And I'll just quickly give you a bit of my own personal experience with this. When I began journalism more than 30 years ago, it was very idealistic reasons. And for the greater part of my career, there was great freedom. We thought the sky was the limit, we could investigate everyone and everything, and that's exactly what happened. We had editors who supported us through many of the publications I worked with. But as then you started rising up the ladder, and finally became editor in 2-3 different publications, I realized how this freedom was being gradually circumcised, and eventually in 2011, I resigned as managing editor of Hindustan Times, precisely because I found that there was no way you could hold true to your beliefs and continue in mainstream media as well. There were all kinds of special interests in across 2 or 3 of these papers I worked. You couldn't cover the sugar industries in one. In somewhere else, you couldn't cover real estate. In some places, you had to even take care of how the air traffic control was handled because the owner wanted his flight bumped up in the takeoff sequence. There are all kinds of ridiculous things and things that were funny and not so funny. So I think this is the heart of the problem. And then when I shifted to the independent media, as you said, India Spend is a non-profit. We are a data-driven public interest journalism. We are focused on public interest, on a lot of issues of public interest which don't get covered by the mainstream media. Health, education, things like that. But this is a very, as you point out, this is a very tenuous existence. As a non-profit, first of all, you are subjected to a whole lot of laws that really you should not be subject to. And the government can actually hit at you at any point of time. Only last month, and I don't mind sharing this, only last month, for example, 2 of our main funders just dropped out overnight. And it emerged that was because some pressure came in from the government for something that we do specifically, which is running a hate crime database. The independent media, I think, in India lead a very tenuous existence, and we'll have to see what happens now as the days go by.
Thanks, Amar. I think the hate crime database seems to be a problem with everybody. We've had
the
other
editor at the Hindustan Times.
Yes. Joshi's also moved from print to online, and I think his concerns revolve a lot around advertising disguised as editorial, and his pet peeve, I think, is private treaties.
Well, one of them, yes. I have several pet peeves. Just quickly as a business journalist, you're always told follow the money kind of thing. And if you follow money, it is not ownership alone that matters. It also matters where your money, your advertisers, who are your advertisers, who are the people who give you unsecured loans? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, eNadu was taken over an unsecured loan by Reliance Industries for about 400 crores, right? And that was a publicly listed company. It was not disclosed for 4 years before the final takeover happened, kind of thing. Anyway, so the question is, where is the money coming from, and what is the color of the money, kind of thing, right? And private treaties, theoretically, absolutely nothing wrong with it. I am monetizing my future inventory, future kind of column space, or advertising airtime. But what goes wrong is the way it is sold and the absolute lack of disclosures or ethics when you, as part of an advertising deal for, say, maybe 4 crores, you also promise somebody so much column centimeters on your editorial pages or on television time, kind of thing. So I just tweeted out saying that this media ownership monitor is a fantastic piece of work. But if I may offer the researchers a little bit of some inputs, it will be really nice to just do simple things like where are loans in each one of these companies coming from? Why would I give any media company, which is, by the way, a failing business, media owner should sell and get out of the business. Why would I give a losing business unsecured loans or other deals?
So talking of lack of disclosures and transparencies, which Joshi's mentioned, Nitin's been wanting to talk about skeletons in the cupboard and how ownership, this unwitting nexus between owners and politics. You want to say about that?
Actually, I probably would be a outlier here Because if you look at it from a market capitalist perspective, ownership shouldn't matter, competition matters. As long as there's adequate competition in the market, it doesn't matter who owns it, because you will be able to bring about the public interest, whether it's airlines, whether it's telecoms. I used to be a telecoms regulator in Singapore before, so we used to look at it this way. And some of us studied this and said, look, as long as you have 4 players in any market and there is contestability, you have adequate competition to protect the public interest at the at the fundamental level. So if you look at the numbers we saw, we have 120,000 publications. We have 3 or 4 players in each market competing for the same eyeball or the same reader. So it looks like that baseline competition requirement is met, and ownership doesn't matter, because you have to be different in order to compete. But it's not happening, right? So it's not happening, and we see systematic biases. We see systematic, when I say systematic, they all point in the same direction, happening across the board. And if you look at it, then the question which I have to ask, which I ask myself, is why is everybody so compromised? There must be some compromise. Everybody is compromised in some way or the other. All 3, all 4, all 5 players in the same market are compromised in one way or the other. And that's when I was reminded of a very interesting quotation by my friend Manish Abarwal, who runs Teamlease. He said that you can't comply with 100% of India's laws without violating 10% of them. So, you have a set of laws which across the board, which apply to individuals, to companies, firms, which are hard to comply. Another example, I think a story will make it interesting. This is apocryphal, I don't know whether it's true or not, but many years ago, when microbreweries were first coming into India, people were applying for microbrewery licenses. They were not available initially, but later microbrewery licenses became available. And they said, look, when you're producing a beer, you are subject to the Excise Act. And under the Excise Act, you can have a maximum of 1 door in a place where beer is being brewed, because that's where the excise inspector sits and looks at every single bottle which comes out so that excise can be paid. So microbrewery can have at most 1 door. But then they said, look, you're also retailing beer in the same place, so you come under the Shops and Establishments Act. And under the Shops and Establishments Act, because of fire safety, you must have minimum of 2 doors, right? So now if you're a microbrewery, you can't have more than 1 door, and you should have a minimum of 2 doors. How do you comply? Right? So of course you say, okay, who's the more favorable inspector, and let me just be nice to that guy, do something, pass some money under the table. Right? So here's where compromise happens. At the moment you have 1 door, right? The guy whom you owe 2 doors to is going to be able to take something out of you, right? And this happens across the board. Individuals with taxes, companies with filing, you might not have done your annual general meeting on a particular day, and that's held against you, and all sorts of things. And because everybody is sort of compromised along the way, it becomes very easy to manipulate these people, right? So when everybody has a skeleton in the cupboard, it's very easy to go and look into people's cupboards and say, look, you have a skeleton in the cupboard, so now let me look after you. I think that's happening. So the answer to this is not so much looking into the media per se, but look at the overall economy and say, look, we have complicated, non-interoperable set of regulations which apply to an individual, which apply to a political party, which apply to a firm, and we've got to sort these out. Until we are able to solve those regulations out, we are all going to be compromisable, right? It's very easy. You could come down and say, Syed, we have a tax investigation. You didn't file your 2006 returns, and you have like 500 rupees which you didn't pay, and now we're going to sit down and investigate everything. Show me your receipts, right? And process is the punishment. You're going to be following this for the next 2 to 3 years, and you're going to say, hey, let me go, I'll change this report for you. Not Syed per se, but people like Syed, right? So that's what is happening, and I think that's what we've got to target.
So Nisha, do you think that's true? Do you think there's more need?
Okay, so Nitin's observations are correct by and large, but in cross-media holdings, they don't apply, because we are an over-legislated country, but there is no legislation vis-a-vis cross-media. MIB has a legislation which is broadcasters can't hold more than 20% in DPOs. that relates only to television. Radio is a little more legislated in the sense that they clearly say political parties and religious parties cannot own radio stations, but only AIR airs news. Private channels do not air news. And digital media has no legislation, and as far as print is concerned, also there is no legislation as far as cross-media ownership is concerned, whether vertical or horizontal. The problem becomes that TRAI had made certain recommendations because they said it's a highly, the market is, the cross-holdings are increasing, and therefore in 2014 they made a recommendation. They said competition cannot determine plurality, only because he said media is not like a biscuit or shoe which you're selling. So you have the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, you have TRAI, which is a market regulator, and you have CCI, which is the Competition Commission of India. But very few mergers and acquisitions actually go vis-a-vis media companies to them, and the ones which have gone, which is Reliance and Network 18, they went under Independent Media Trust, were permitted, though CCI said that Reliance has control over Network 18, but there are enough ISPs in the market, so the market competition is fine. So as a result, Network 18 then bought Inadu through various shell companies. So it's problematic. I'm not sure in India that the competition can actually, help plurality stay in the market. What is actually happening is you need the regulations of TRAI, at least some of them. I'm not saying you're right, otherwise India is an over-legislated country, and I have recorded that in my legal assessment. But as far as cross-media holdings is concerned, we are at sea. And Scroll had clearly said the parameters, the yardsticks of the data, even if it's available, it's very difficult to collate and come up with anything. Because actually, I think the other act which needs slight tweaking or a lot of tweaking is the Companies Act. I think it is being misused by the companies. They have thousands of shell companies, and everybody files with ROC and MCA, but as the research team says, that data is very hard to analyze. So we have a problem, and I don't think CCI is competent to, at the moment, to solve that problem of plurality by saying there's enough competition in the market.
So if we were to put ourselves in the, since we are all from the media, and put ourselves in the shoes of the audience, and look at it from the audience point of view, does it really matter to us as audience who owns the media? Do we really care? And should media really be what we call objective, unbiased, balanced? Because if you look at older models with the American press, etc., they were all very clearly libertarian and inclined towards one model or one side or the other. So does it actually matter to the audience, and how far does it make a difference?
I want to briefly say, I don't think the audience gives a damn, apart from a very small sliver. Yeah. They don't really care. Yeah. I mean, where are we getting most of our news from? I mean, we've seen this in all our families and friends. They're getting it from WhatsApp. Yeah. You know, all the fake news that are going up, all our uncles, aunts, etc. coming out with, here's what happened, all the ridiculous fake, completely fake nonsense that's being now spouted by ministers. Ministers themselves are forwarding fake news, and many, now in Karnataka, of course, we have people who are running fake news factories, and the police are trying to figure out what to do with that. Yeah. So the public doesn't care.
So what are we doing this for? Why are we having this whole discussion? Anyone?
Go ahead, Samar.
That's a good question.
Yeah. No, but seriously.
So a good example of this is Aaj Tak is India's largest watched news channel. Their best programming ever, and this information is about 4 years old, okay, when I was there. The best news programming ever was this boy called Prince, who fell into a borewell in Haryana.
More than 4 years ago.
No. My information is 4 years ago. So this happened maybe about 10, 12 years ago. And they put a camera at the end of an optic fiber cable into the borewell, and did that. That was the best TRPs ever. Guess where that ranks with overall Hindi entertainment TRPs? At the bottom decile, as in 0 to 10% is where that TRPs work. Now that reflects what my audience wants. Now, if that's what the audience wants, yeah, so be it, kind of thing. Except that I'm not overly pessimistic about this. I think you will have smaller audiences kind of paying for content that they want in different ways, and that model is evolving already as we speak. And I'm optimistic there.
Yeah, so that's the next point that one would look at is where should the funding then come from? You're talking of smaller audiences, people paying for smaller outlets. If you look at the UK just now in the last few months, The Guardian has actually reported a profit through subscriptions. Do you think we are ready to pay for our news in this country?
Asking me? No, we're definitely not ready.
See, I think, I mean, just to take a step back, I think the general audience looks at politics and news as a spectator sport, right? I don't think people have connected news as being material to their future, to their daily lives. It's just seen as, oh, there's a big fight, Mr. X and Mr. Y are slinging it out, and it's entertainment, right? Now, because it's seen largely as entertainment, the willingness to pay is just not there. It's not a value to me, right? Other than entertainment value to me.
Yeah, but they're willing to go pay for a movie to watch a movie.
Yeah, but a lot more movies are now available on
Netflix,
on Netflix and pirated and all that, right? If you can, and then the second the concept I want to bring in here is there's an endowment effect. It's always been free or next to free, so you're unlikely to want to pay, because this is like charging for water, right? Water has now become scarce. You actually have to charge for water, but you go and tell people that I'm going to charge you for water. He says, no, it's always been free. How can you charge me for water? It's my birthright. So I think that's the same with news. And I think you've got to figure out I think some people are trying to do this. You've got to figure out that value proposition you're going to give. What do I get specifically by subscribing to this or paying you for the news, right? What do I get which I don't get from the others? I think the small attempts are being made worldwide and India too. I hope those succeed.
Yeah, somebody, you were going to say something?
Sometimes you just have to do the right thing. And I think we were discussing about the relevance, for example, of the MOM database.
Yes.
I think it's something that you have to do, because you have to know people, you may believe that your larger audience does not care, but you have to know these are some things that you have to do. In a democracy, there are certain things, like a constitution, you require a constitution. There are other things that you require to do. You need to know who owns your media, and at whatever level, and depending on how many people look at it, it doesn't matter, but you must know. And you must go and think, and I think this database needs to be developed and built further. The same way we run a hate crime database, it's not very popular, because people we are continuously under attack, and we know that this whole thing may sink us one day. But the point is, it has to be done. Someone has to do it. And that's what we are supposed to be doing in the media.
Yes. And yes.
Yeah, the other thing is, if we don't have too many players, Caravan had a piece which said that the TRA, the government data plans were favoring a particular telecom. We all know who that telecom network is. Then what would happen to the net neutrality? The net neutrality policy framework, which was brought in 2018, if you're left with one player, then I think net neutrality also goes for a toss. So to that extent, you need a few players here and there, whether it's telecom or whether it's television.
Sure. So when we are saying that somebody has to do this and it has to be done, are we going to look then at what kind of regulation, what kind of control? We've always said that governmental control doesn't work, and self-regulation is utopian. So where do we take it from here? So if I were to give you an example, and I'm going back to the US again, is that after the Great Depression, during the Great Depression, the media came in for a lot of flack because people said that it colluded with private power to make the depression happen. And then after that, people started apparently moving, this is a piece again I got from Caravan, and people started moving out, cancelling newspaper subscriptions and migrating towards radio. Around that time in the 1940s, Henry Luce of Time magazine decided to put good money, $200,000, to set up a commission to look at the present state and the future of the US media. he asked the Chancellor of the University of Chicago, Robert Hutchins, to look into this. The Hutchins Commission took about 3 years. It came in, it was scoffed at and so on and so forth. But later, much later, it actually became the basis for what the US media turned out to be post-war. So, two thoughts. One, given the fact that the First Amendment of our Constitution is completely opposite to the First Amendment of the US Constitution, what is the way forward for the media? And second, do we really need a media that should be completely unbiased, or do we need a media that should be completely transparent and say, this is where I got the money from and this is who I support?
I would agree with the latter, which is the media need to be transparent, where you got your money from. And that is a question many people have. The first thing they ask you is, if they do not like what you're reporting, they said, who's paying you? Where are you getting the money from? So everyone should be transparent and out there. And if they're not going to do that, first of all, I think if there has to be new media regulation, it has to be around transparency. It does not have to be anything else. They cannot be regulators of the kind, I think, we have. Perhaps, you know, the regulator that Dr. Qureshi was talking about might make some sense, yes. Yeah. But otherwise, I would be very suspicious of a regulator in a country like India, because the regulator itself now we know can be influenced very easily. I think the thing to look at is, what are the new kind of media models that are arriving? The media across the world are in a flux. There's no question about that. Everywhere it's in a flux, and they don't know how these things are going to evolve. So given that fact, I think in India there's of course even greater flux. So given that fact, I think it's very important to see how these models are evolving. One of them, of course, as you mentioned, was the Independent and Public Spirited Media Trust. For those of you who don't know, the IPS Media Trust is based here in Bangalore, and it takes in money from about 9 or 10 people we know very well, like Azim Premji, Nandan Nilekani, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, etc., and some others as well. And then the whole idea is to give this money as grants to independent media, and from both sides of the spectrum is what they say, and then give it 3 years to stand on their own 2 feet. So the first year you get 75%, 100% funding. The second year you get 75% funding. The third year 25%, and the fourth year they withdraw all funding. We are in the 4th year, so we are wondering what to do the next year.
But someone tell me, the people who decide that are separate from the funders, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's the main thing, I think.
Yeah, and the people who have contributed the money. So initially, in fact, I was involved initially in the setting of this. So there was one of the guys who's now given money told me, okay, now let me get this straight. You're going to go to people in India, you're going to go to these tycoons, and you're going to tell them that please contribute money, and the money you contribute will go to an independent media trust, and then you will lose all control over this money and any say over it. He said, is that right? I said, yes. He said, good luck. But the point is, after all this, it has emerged.
Yes,
it is funding people.
It's
it is funding a diverse
the print, Caravan.
Yes, absolutely. Swarajya.
Swarajya, yes.
As well.
Yes,
and a whole lot of other organizations actually that you may not have heard of. I certainly have not heard of. For example, there's a small organization called Dual News that they support.
I looked at the website, yes.
Yeah. There are some, they've just started supporting 2 really small Kannada news organizations here, which again nobody knows about here. But so these are all, I think, evolving models that are arriving. I'm not saying the non-profit is the only way to go. In fact, we are wondering now what will happen if all our funding gets cut off. Yeah. We are thinking that our plan B may be to going for profit, whatever. But I'm just saying that exercise has begun across the world, I think.
Yeah. So one clarification: content does not need any regulation. So we were only talking about carriage, cross-media ownership, and a carriage. Content, one doesn't want to touch it all, there's no question. In fact, what Dr. Qureshi mentioned, the self-regulatory independent authority has an election guideline in which it says that during elections, if a channel has a political affiliation, they have to declare it. If you have an advertorial, you have to declare it. So the self-regulatory organization does have those guidelines, which their members have to follow. And most channels would rather not be members because they'll end up apologizing or getting fined. But yes, they have those guidelines of transparency.
I think that makes a difference. Do you think this business of having a regulation?
I'm with Samar on that one. I'm an editor. I'm anti-regulation kind of thing. But I do think that if there is a code of conduct or a code of ethics on how we practice journalism is out there public, and anybody can question even if we went wrong in one small little bit of things, and if the newsroom is responsive to that, I think that's a good way to kind of hold yourself there. And I know that there are several mainstream news organizations which have codes, but they don't keep to it. And maybe the audience needs to kind of pull that out and say, hey, how do you carry this story when this is what your code says, kind of thing. And hold editors, hold proprietors accountable for that.
Yeah, but is the audience, I'm sorry to sound really talking down, but is the audience really educated enough to say this is not done?
Yeah, so at Factorly, we count about very small, right? About 250,000 kind of uniques a month kind of thing versus 100 million for the Times Network, etc. But among our readers, they are fairly discerning readers in the journalism that we produce. And there are times we've been taken to task. It could be tasks on visuals, not just, okay, this is a very good example. Normally, media houses screw up, mess up with the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir kind of part of map of India, right? We showed a Pakistan map, which included Pakistan-occupied Kashmir in their map. An Indian reader pointed out, hey, that is disputed territory. You're an Indian publication. If you're following rules, fix that kind of.
It's an offense.
It's an offense, absolutely. We did it within 20 minutes flat. My graphics says got it fixed, and we got it fixed, kind of thing. So I like to believe that there are discerning readers out there. It depends on who you're addressing, right? I mean,
yeah. So to come back to this discerning reader, and is he willing to pay? Are we looking at the possibility of a subscription model? Now, if you look at what we had with Lankesh Patrike when it started, it was a completely subscription model. It didn't take advertising, and it ran quite well. Do you think there's space for it in today's world, where you have publications like The Wire saying pay 20 rupees for this, or pay 10 rupees for this, or pay 200 rupees for this? The Hoot was trying to run a subscription model, and it hasn't gotten anywhere. So do you think there's space for that?
I think, first of all, a bit about the audience. I tend to also run down the audience by saying this is a WhatsApp influenced audience, and that's true to a large extent. But this is also because they are getting this barrage of low quality journalism. I think across the world it's also been proven that if you give people high quality journalism, they tend to at least look at it. Even if they don't agree with it, they tend to look at it. I think one good example is, like, for yesterday, for me, the biggest news that came out yesterday was the release of the annual SRS, which is a sample registration system, which gives you the update on what is India's infant mortality rate. And the infant mortality rate is a measure, a very important measure of well-being of national health and national well-being overall. Now, many states have now, some states have now fallen to single digits, which is a huge thing. And there has been, I think, over 11 years, a 42% decline in India's infant mortality, which is also big. It's also very significant that we have still below the global average. Now, all these are extremely significant. Where did you read about any of this? Did anyone hear about this in any paper or in any news channel? Yet we saw it last night, and I saw that the whole health professionals and others, everyone in India and abroad, were abuzz with the release of the latest sample registration system. So if you do not, and the mainstream media have abdicated large swaths of areas that are vital to this country's well-being and required to be covered, and just are not covered. And they have a lot of resources, but those resources are not put into these things. For example, agriculture. If you look at agriculture, typically in most newspapers, whether it's the Hindustan Times, etc., all these people that are reporting multi-crore growth, etc., and profits, they have like one person covering agriculture, maybe two at the most. One and two people. So you have a political bureau that sits in Delhi and covers the political functioning of the country. But 650, 800 million people are still dependent on agriculture, and your main newspaper of the country has one reporter and two reporters. Something is really wrong. So if you start giving people rubbish, they will start going somewhere else or doubting your credibility. And I think that is a larger issue.
You'd asked about subscription or reader contributions. I think Bangalore has a great example of subscription product, small but growing and doing well. The Ken. The Ken has more than 10,000 paying subscribers. From whatever is publicly available, the churn is less, the number of new subscribers joining is, and renewals, that ratio is down, all very promising stuff. And I think there is a sustainable model to be built. It'll perhaps take a little time, but there is a sustainable model to be built. Will it be the Financial Times tomorrow? I don't know, maybe not, but it will. It is a sustainable, good journalism, hard journalism outfit which is doing well.
It could be tomorrow's Politico.
How much do they charge? About including taxes, 3,500 or so a year. Yeah.
3,500 a year is a lot of money.
Yes. Including taxes. Oh, guys, please somebody can fact check that for me.
Yeah. So you've Nisha been with the NBA, and would you like to extrapolate from your experiences with the NBA? Whether a regulatory model for online and print and other areas would work.
Okay, so NBA is a News Broadcasters Association. Its members are joined voluntarily, and now they originally created the News Broadcasting Standards Authority, which is a totally independent body. It was chaired only by retired Supreme Court judges, Justice Verma, Justice R.V. Ravindran. And now Justice Ravindran's term just got over, and so it's now Justice Sikri, all from the Supreme Court. They have independent members, 4 of them. Dr. Qureshi has been there, Mr. Nitin Desai, Ms. Leela Punappa. So there are several, and then they've got editorial members also who explain the technicalities and the difficulties. And I think self-regulation has been quite effective, I must say, over the years. Dr. Qureshi will be able to say that the channels do listen. Of course, they resist. And there are the 1 or 2 who never listen. But the only thing is that NBSA can fine, it can censure. They don't mind paying the fine, they don't mind the censure. What they hate is apologizing on screen, which they've done. And your channels, which are known to be, well, which word do I use to describe them? But even they've done it, and you can recommend suspension to the MIB. But NBSA and NBA are not statutory bodies. They're self-regulatory, and they've been relatively effective. But we have about 80% viewership, so you have the main channels, but a lot of channels are not there because they don't want to come. Their answer is, if we don't become a member of NBA, we don't come under the jurisdiction of NBSA, and therefore we'll sort out our problems with the local police or with whoever, the local politician. But if we become your member, we are subject to the NBSA jurisdiction. But despite that, I think it's been quite effective because members realize they don't want government regulation. So again, NBSA does not touch content. It does not touch editorial freedom. It is there to raise the level of broadcasting standards, which is that essentially you stick to journalistic ethics. If you're maligning someone, you better give the other person you better give the version of the other person, and it can't be so accuracy, impartiality, neutrality is basically, and objectivity is the code of ethics of NBSA.
Right. So do you think that can be taken forward?
Yes. Yes. Actually, even in digital, Go News is a member of NBA. Mr. Pankaj Pachauri's launch. I think it can be taken forward because they are pushing that if the government recommends that the code of ethics be included, just as ASCII's code of ethics has been included in the CTN Act, just the code, a lot of people will become members, and it will be a self-regulatory thing where government is not regulating you, but basic journalistic ethics will be adhered to.
Yeah, but Nisha, we live in a time when ministers in the cabinet have been given different publications to look after. Editors get calls 7 p.m. Hey, we hear that a story like this is running. Make sure it is kosher to us, kind of thing. Now, those kind of non-market forces, no government in its sane mind will allow to become legislation, kind of thing, right? So it's a long, hard battle.
We fought a very hard battle from 2008,
right.
And the standards are quite high, and we are pushing that they be accepted. If they do, great. If they don't, then we continue as NBSA and NBA are doing. But a lot of online platforms are now becoming members. So, which is interesting because Mr. Pankaj Pachori was the first, Go News was the first.
So I just want to draw a comparison between what's happening in the US and here, right? Donald Trump goes after Jeff Bezos because he's upset with Washington Post. He goes after New York Times. There's very little Donald Trump can do to them, right? Why is that the case? Because as long as the Washington Post and New York Times follow, operate in a law-abiding manner and comply with all the compliance that they need to come, there's very little the President of the United States can do to them. It's different in India because you can't be in complete compliance, right? And I think I want to draw that back until the answer to much of these problems lie outside the media. They lie in our political economy until we have a system where there are huge sets of laws and regulations and all of that which keep tying you up in knots. You're not going to be able to solve these
And
problems.
they're not even clear laws.
They're not even clear laws.
They're fragmented. The US First Amendment is very strong, which is why Meryl Streep can stand up and say what she wants at the Oscar, but if an Amir Khan says something, it goes a bit
Because
haywire.
there are always hooks you can find to go after this person.
So shall we ask the audience what they think? Yes, Imran. Can somebody give him the microphone?
There are certain very positive examples of the NBA which I can give you. There are also some negative ones. The first one is the manner in which the Ayodhya judgment was covered by private television channels. That is a remarkable way of ensuring self-discipline, where every reporter who was on the field on that particular day, or every staff member, including the production side, was asked to read the guidelines, sign and send it back to the management so that it could go back to the NBA. That was one remarkable example of it. Then there was one more, which was on how communal riots should be covered. This is before the Ayodhya verdict. We had regional, the national channels normally covered it. Followed those instructions, just like you should not show the faces of adolescent victims of rape or sexual assault. But then you also had this regional channels who were members of the NBA not following any instruction, where they showed early morning visuals of a communal tension in Bangalore, for example, as at 5 o'clock in the evening, when half of Bangalore shut down because they said there's tension in one particular area. Those norms are still not followed.
So that problem NBSA has, and NBA also has it, because most channels, whether regional or national, do not want to be members because they're subject then to the jurisdiction, and they may be, if NBSA recommends suspension of license, MIB may not suspend it, but it's a big thing and everybody carries it. So in most cases, I have to say, we've been able to levy fines and get the apologies. I think there may be about one case where it hasn't happened. So when they do that, in most cases, they are asked to carry the regret and pay the 1 lakh fine. I think.
That is pittance for a regional channel, which.
But if a channel then decides to walk out of NBA and doesn't, the NBA is a self-regulatory, in the sense it's a voluntary membership. So if somebody decides to walk out, there's where we face the problem. They can walk out and there's nothing much we can do.
But you know what the NBA has not done? I can give you one example again from Karnataka as well as from Andhra Pradesh.
Just a minute, I think Dr. Qureshi would like to say something. Maybe he's an independent member. I'm counsel, but he's an independent member. Maybe he's.
It happened, 1 or 2 channels walked out because the decisions of the authority were not favorable to them. For which, one solution which I have been offering, the fact that this has evolved as a very beautiful model, a unique model, the fact that the Ministry of INB is also recognizing it as a good model, and every month we are receiving dozens of complaints for us to decide, which means even the government accepts us as a very, very good authority. I think the government can come in and, although government regulation, as I said, is a certain no-no, but government can make it compulsory that every channel, for it to retain its license, has to become a member of NBA and has to be subjected to NBSA authority. It is
not a statutory regulation.
It is voluntary, but government can make it compulsory for everyone to be. Otherwise, it's very easy. They'll walk out and follow no discipline. Now, one excuse they give is that, the membership of NBA is very expensive and we are very poor channel, we cannot afford. Some solution has to be found. Some people say that it's not very expensive. I think 5 lakhs a year.
It's 5 lakhs, but I think it's less for some associated members, but the major channels pay 5 lakhs per annum.
Yes, if it becomes compulsory for all of them by a statute, that they will become part of NBA and NBSA, and their fee can be regulated from 5 lakhs to 1 lakh to make it affordable. I think that will be another good model where, with government support, with the ownership and self-regulation, and independent regulation, it will be a mix of all three.
But we don't touch content. Again.
Yeah, just one more point. This is with regard to the NBA again. This particular regional channel was finally dealt with by a notice. Once the Director General of Police wanted to know how do you regulate TV channels and how do you people manage. So this NBA guidelines was given to the DGP, Ajay Kumar Singh Akhilesh, for example. And he called up the TV channel and said, these are the guidelines, please follow them. The channel fell in line. So is it possible for the NBA to brief all the DGPs on this issue?
At the moment, NBA is evolving, and I don't think NBA has that much funding to do that. But they are trying to go to the government and say, if you recognize our code, which we will implement, not the government, then maybe we can take it forward from there. As of now, they're still trying to get government to recognize it so that they get membership, and people can't walk out, and the channels or the online platforms are members of some self-regulatory organization. They can't go scot-free.
But ultimately, most of the TV channels depend on that 7 o'clock call, as Joshi said.
Okay. Can we come back to ownership and any other questions we might have? Yes, Giri.
I can actually say that India Spend and Factor Daily are extremely brave enough to launch their own websites. But I think the larger question, as some of you suggested, was about funding. Do you really think FDI in media is the answer for all these kind of issues? And the other question is that will it in any way compromise the way Indian journalists want to report?
You have sectors which are far more critical than media, where you have foreign direct investment happening. You've opened up defense, you've opened up life insurance, several other sectors kind of thing. There's no reason in hell that this can't work. The question is, hey, will Associated Press or will Financial Times call Kashmiri terrorist a terrorist or a militant kind of thing? That is the kind of debate that we have, right? I think those are smaller things. Those can be kind of set by a bunch of style guides, or just like I can't put a map of India without Pakistan occupied Kashmir. I mean, there are laws that you can evolve there, kind of thing. Is it going to happen anytime soon? I'm not going to hold my breath for that, Giri.
Will it affect editorial freedom?
Editorial freedom, it has to. I mean, as you were saying, if there's a foreign owner versus somebody here, as much as it happens in Times of India today.
You'll certainly still get a call from the coal minister, but it is up to you as an editor whether you want to stand up or not, or say that, hey boss, here's my severance package, I'm walking, kind of thing, right? Sorry.
I have a slightly different one. When we talk about FDI, we are usually talking about FT and economists taking a stake and all that. We are more or less comfortable with it because we know the transparency and the standards are more or less visible to us. But what if China CGTN takes a stake, or Russia Today comes in and runs a TV channel or a newspaper in India? I'd be worried because I'd single out China, right? Let's not even talk about Russia. I'll single out China. Here's a very opaque country which has specific interests which might be inimical to ours, getting a free run in our country, and we have no reciprocal rights on their side. That worries me, and I wouldn't condone that.
So something like TikTok does bother you?
Yeah, in fact, I spoke about, it's okay to ban TikTok because the China's Great Firewall is a trade barrier. It's not free trade. It's free trade when they allow us to, like our company should be able to operate there. But you have a firewall which says, look, you can't do anything here.
Sure.
But I'll run TikTok in your country. It's not free trade.
In any case, I think news is only 49%. Television is 49%, FDI and print is 26%. I don't think they're lying more than that.
Yeah, Samar.
No, I mean, I take what you're saying, but I think the question you raise is extremely relevant. That this whole question of foreign investment in the media is a bogey. I mean, let's face it, this is being stopped simply because there is the governments of the day. The previous government, is not just this government, the previous government as well. There was the same bogey is being floated, that somehow there will be foreign control of the media. I mean, this is all nonsense. As you said, this is in many other spheres we have this, and much worse control. Political parties get foreign funding. We know this. So why on earth should there be a problem here? If anything, in some fashion, we might get much higher standards. Of the type that we don't have now. And of course, we might also have open to the danger of the Chinese walking in. The Russians, I don't know, but they're supposed to be friendly to us. But the Chinese walking in, sure, I mean, all this, you can look at all this, but it doesn't mean that you stop everything. For example, now, again, coming back to our own example, we're a non-profit. Now, it should be easy for a non-profit surely to run a media outlet. It's not. We're registered under the Charities Commissioner in Maharashtra, which is one of the most restrictive places on earth. For example, when we began some years ago, the foundation that runs India Spend is called the Spending and Policy Research Foundation. So initially, the idea was to call it the Indian Spending and Policy Research Foundation. The Charity Commissioner said, no, you cannot. Under so-and-so law, etc., you cannot use the word India in a non-profit. As far as the foundation goes. And that's just one example. There are a whole lot of other restrictions that you cannot do. Now, even if, for example, we want to get an advisory board member, a trustee on the board, we have to go. All his exactly. Yes. And spouse. So many people don't want to be. They don't want to be. Yeah. And now, for example, one of our members, our trustees, dropped out, and unfortunately for us, went and joined the Congress party, which was the worst thing for us to happen, of course. So the new trustee, the two new trustees have come on board, who now. It's been 8 months now. The Charities Commissioner is still not giving the approval, saying yes, they can go. One of them is a sports journalist, and the other one is a financial markets manager. This is the kind of regulation you're subjected to in any case.
Any more questions? Yes, gentleman there.
Yeah, actually, it's one of India's most celebrated journalists who now runs his own TV channel, and I think in one of the interviews, he clearly said factual journalism is dead and the public doesn't want it. And what is really interesting is, you present news with your views, and that is what the public wants. And of course, he's been heavily funded, very successful, blah, blah, whatever. And so what is that you think about it? Because he says, I understand the other side. And he says, let them exist. I don't care about them. But this is me and I exist and all I care about is myself. So it's clear.
So if you're referring to Shekhar Gupta's, are you? No, because I can respond then. I can respond then.
No. The only person who wants to know everybody, you know that, right?
Xavier, you're not helping me at all.
It's Arnav actually, yeah. You need to.
Okay. I haven't seen this, so I see. So honestly, can't comment on this.
It's actually an exclusive interview that he gave where he actually explained this model and logic actually.
Okay. Can I come?
Yeah. Sure. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
See, I think it should be perfectly okay. There should be people who say, look, factual journalism is dead, opinion journalism works. There could be people who say, people taking off their clothes on television is popular, so I'm going to do that, right? This is how a competitive media market should play out, right? I think what we should be worried about is when there is a lack of integrity and systematic bias or violation of the law in these cases. Otherwise, we should be able to accept that.
So if I agree with Nitin, if we accept that, you need transparency. He needs to say what are his affiliations, why he's saying it, why does he go the way he does. Otherwise, it's not fair on the public, because if it's not factual journalism and he's purely stating his opinion, then the audience needs to know it's an opinion and not a fact. Because journalistic ethics needs accuracy and impartiality.
Yeah, and also on the question of transparency, we're very clear, especially in Tamil Nadu. Everybody knows who owns what TV channel, and there is no question about that, right? So it's very clear, and so yeah.
They say that in Tamil Nadu, if you really want to know what's going on, you have to watch at least a minimum of 3 TV channels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Shashwati had a question.
Yeah, so I have a very basic question, and I'm glad that it's ultimately come down to that. While there is no debate about the need for transparency, especially in strengthening a democracy, and a lot of us are journalists here, how does this transparency save us from the rank bad journalism that we get now?
Sure. Anyone wants to answer that?
I'm sorry.
How does it save us from the bad journalism? Even if how does transparency save us?
Can I come in? Very, very cynical view, it won't. Okay? I'll give you. There's an Association for Democratic Reforms, right? They've been producing list after list of people, of candidates who have criminal records, who are fighting for parliament, and they've published this year after, for the last 3 or 4 elections. People still vote those people. As long as people are willing to vote in a person with a criminal record, knowingly, fully willingly, there's nothing we can do about it. So I think the argument is not so much
I don't think you got me right. I'm really not talking about those who are buying into bad journalism. I'm flipping it over. I'm saying as a journalist, how does this transparency, hypothetically speaking, if I were to be an editor of, let's say, a national daily today, how would this transparency help me produce better journalism? That's my question. It's not whether you're willing to buy my bad journalism. You are. Media is spreading. So you are pretty obvious you are willing to buy bad journalism. My question is, how do we bring back good journalism?
So transparency doesn't answer that.
So that's really my question.
Transparency, see, so if you're saying, at the moment you say competition determines the market, then transparency won't solve that problem. We are saying that, Nitin is saying
that competition for what? What are we competing for? As journalists, what are we competing for?
I agree with you.
We're not in a profit maximization business, right? So what are we competing for?
No, now the thing is that if you ask the television channels, they're competing for TRPs, according to them. Then that's where the bad journalism comes from. So transparency and competition, which is why TRAI says media should not be within the jurisdiction of the Competition Commission of India, because it's not shoes and biscuits that you're selling. There needs to be an authority for the cross-media holdings. That is TRAI's views. Government has not accepted it, and it's with IMC. But to improve journalism...
Yeah, Samar has something to say. Yeah?
No, I was just saying journalism is, apart from everything else, is very much in the profit maximization business. Certainly television is, there's no question. Even a non-profit is in the profit maximization business. Every day, last few days I've been doing, our increments. And that depends on how we have managed to get
yeah, but Samar, does it have to be based on bad journalism? That's the question. Is it not possible to get TRPs doing perfectly valid, authenticated, decent stories, irrespective of topic? I don't want to put a sort of a value judgment saying infant mortality is more important than fashion. Let's assume both are equally important. Can I do an honest story on either?
The answer is no. Because it's too expensive to do good journalism. We are such a small shop, Factor Daily. We had just 11 people. We have downsized to 4 people over a few weeks ago because we just couldn't kind of keep the numbers going, kind of thing. Maybe Times of India can do it, but then it's all a question of who's the most efficient aggregator of eyeballs, because that's what the market kind of pays me for, kind of thing, right? And how do I get more and more eyeballs? I have Sunny Leone on a front page, whatever else it is. I'm not saying it's bad, but if you're defining good journalism as different from that, you need a Ken to come up and evolve. You need a Politico to come up here and evolve, kind of thing. You need an Axios to come up here and evolve upwards, kind of thing. Very few, they will never get 100 million eyeballs audience. They'll perhaps get 1 million or so, and that's great. If 1 million people paying me $10 a year, great.
Does it come back to you get the readers you deserve and the readers get the media you deserve?
Kind of, yeah.
Sort of.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
I answered you, Shaswari, but that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, just one last question.
There's not a
we're
question
really running out of time. Yeah.
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Jay Krishnan from the Media Foundation Summer was talking about.
Yeah.
Just to kind of put the record straight, just in case it comes to bite us, we don't do 100%, not even in the first year. 100% funding, not even the first year. And we don't do 3 years, we do up to 3 years.
All right.
Depending on the performance
Thank
each
you.
year. Just to get that clear,
Thanks.
just in case it comes to bite
Thanks.
us. God bless, God bless.
Thank you. Okay, do we want to have any famous last words, each one of us?
We didn't talk about this at all, but the biggest elephant in the room is social media.
Yeah.
And that is what is, that has the maximum audience. I mean, you can never kind of think of that kind of an audience as any one of us as a journalist here, kind of thing. And there are, as journalists, I think we need to rethink on how we do our journalism, how we distribute it, etc. kind of thing.
I just want to say that after 30 years and my whole lifetime in a professional lifetime in journalism, I feel every day like I'm now beginning to relearn everything, and I find every day I have to relearn my entire craft and reinvent myself.
Can I ask one last question?
I think we're
Here.
so close. Can we ask that?
No, just one last question. I think it's very important. Please. I'm Narayankar from the Press Trust of India. I was just hearing one of the colleagues here talking about good journalism and bad journalism. I just want to know what is the definition of good journalism and bad journalism. And the most important thing, and there is always a lot of stress on neutrality instead of truth. Nowadays, if you see, if I analyze that BJP is winning this election, there are some section of media fraternity who will just term it as biased analysis.
Sure.
This is a very big problem, and how do you address this problem?
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, you said your name was, sir?
Narayankar from the Press
Hi,
Trust of India.
Narayankar, we can discuss this all night and we'll still not finish it. But a good question to ask about good journalism and bad journalism is there good tea, is there bad tea? If you can answer that question, I will answer your question if there's good journalism or bad journalism. Thank you.
Yeah, last words.
Yeah, just to say it's not that necessarily that everybody wants to run the channels the way they are running it. Unfortunately, the GE channels get money, their per second payment is, I think, 100 times more than the news channels. So there is a revenue problem even in the electronic media. A big, maybe that's the reason that they do what they do. But the GE channels are not, because they get paid very, very well for their coverage. Yeah, sorry, general entertainment.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for a lovely evening.
Thank you so much, and this was really, really interesting, and I hate to see this come to an end, and I'm sure our audience feel the same And I'm 101% sure that we'll have a lot of offline conversations over the dinner, and that's absolutely okay. We've already getting pretty late. Just to conclude with my word of thanks to everyone present here tonight. It's been a lovely evening to have you all over. Thank you so much to our eminent panel, to Mr. Qureshi, Ms. Ila Sharma. Thank you everyone to be here. And last but not the least, I would want to thank Mr. Olaf Steenfurt, who is the project director with Media Monitor Germany. He is actually the brainchild behind the entire research, but unfortunately he was denied a visa into India. We don't know the reasons, but I'm sure Olaf is missing all this. And thank you so much, Olaf, if you're watching this. Thank you so much. And a big thanks to the team of RSF present here and the people who are not present here and the team of data leads. Thank you so much once again. Have a nice dinner and a nice night. Good night.